with Lisa Anderson-Ogilvy,
Yes.
our leader.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Anderson-Ogilvy. I'm your interim community development director, and I'm going to attempt to explain short-term rentals and accessory short-term rentals and what the difference is and what the proposal is, and address some of the concerns or testimony we heard at the last public hearing. And Bryce put together this handout, and you all have a copy of it in your addition sheet that we hope will help kind of explain the difference again. So a short-term rental is a commercial enterprise, basically. You're renting your entire house. You don't live in that house necessarily. There's no limit on the number of guests or the number of guest rooms. There is a parking requirement, one parking space for every guest room that you rent. Today in the code, we call that a bed and breakfast, and we require conditional use for that if you're in a single-family zone. Under the proposed ordinance that we presented at the last public hearing, we changed the name to short-term rental. Sorry, I know that has confused a lot of people. We changed the name. It's still a conditional use in the single-family zone. If you were doing a full-on commercial enterprise, renting your entire house, you don't live there, you're not going to be there welcoming the people and being there with them, that requires a conditional use. That requires one parking space per guest room. That's how it is today. That's how it will be under this ordinance. We did add something, though. We added a license requirement, and as part of that license requirement, the operator would have to notify the city of a local contact. That's something that doesn't exist in the code today. That's something that would exist under this ordinance that we think would make it better. So besides changing the name and kind of confusing folks with that, we didn't really change anything today for bed and breakfast in the single-family zones. We did introduce a whole new concept that we're calling accessory short-term rental. This is not intended to be 100% commercial type of use. It's really meant to be that the owner or the long-term renter is there, and that's their primary house. That's where they live. And they want to rent out some of their rooms to short-term renters. Under the proposal, they could rent 2 rooms maximum and have 2 guests in each room. And they would have to be there while they're renting out those rooms. And they would have to get a license. We did propose that for part of the year, they could go away and rent the entire house. In our original proposal, we said 95 days. So perhaps they go to the beach, they want to rent the entire house, they don't want to be there and just rent the 2 rooms. It sounds like from the testimony, 95 days might be too much. So we wrote in the supplemental staff report that perhaps we would limit that to 60 days or 30 days. Or perhaps if you feel like it, you could eliminate that entirely and say that the owner always has to be there and be a hosted type rental, like a true bed and breakfast type rental. If you decide that it is okay that for some of the time they're not there and they rent the entire house, perhaps it's the 30 or 60 days, we would suggest that you limit the total number of people in the house to 10. We didn't propose that last time, but we think 10 is a reasonable number. And we would propose to send notice or a letter of the license to the neighbors and to the neighborhood association and let them know who the local representative is. We would also post that on our website. So that way, anytime that they are away from the house, if there's a problem, they would have a local rep to contact. Last time you asked us about stats, and we were able to contact Airbnb. It's in the supplemental report, but they let us know as of January of this year, the rentals that they have in Salem, 63% of those people are renting rooms in houses, 34% are renting the entire house. So 63% of the people are renting rooms, and that's really what this accessory short-term rentals is trying to get at, that market of people that want to rent rooms in their house that don't currently have a legal way to do that except going through a full-blown conditional use. And on average, those guest rentals are 1.8 people, and they stay about 3 nights. And 3 nights at a time. And on average, folks that are listing their rooms on Airbnb are renting 66 nights out of the year. Those are Salem stats of January from Airbnb, and those are in your staff report. So some of the other questions we received had to do with inspections. For the short-term rental, the full commercial type enterprise, you have to get an inspection now. We would propose that you still get an inspection every year and pay the fee. For accessory short-term rental, we're proposing an inspection once every 5 years. That was the Planning Commission's recommendation. And we proposed that you could self-certify the safety of your home in the odd years, or every 4 years, every year. And we're proposing an annual license fee of $184.50, which would cover processing the license, inspection, and notice to the neighbors of the license being approved. Other questions had to do with tot tax. Currently, our rules at the city require the operator to collect and remit the tax for any type of commercial lodging, and we propose to continue doing that. Although there's potential for agreements with the home sharing websites in the future that our finance department would continue to explore. And we heard a lot of testimony about an example of a really bad short-term rental happening in a neighborhood and all the concerns that were raised with that. And we talked to those folks when we were putting this proposal together, and so I thought I would go over some of the things that were happening there and how that would work under this proposed ordinance. So in that case, it was a whole house being rented. The owner didn't live there. In fact, I think they lived in California. They didn't have enough parking. A lot of the complaints had to do with parking, blocking the street, blocking mailboxes. There was no limit on the number of guests, so I think they had maybe at one time 10 to 12 guests. So under today's rules, that kind of use would require a conditional use permit. And in fact, that's what we told them when Brady went out and enforced and said, we have complaints, and by the way, you don't comply with the zoning code, you need a conditional use permit. And instead, they chose to eventually to quit operating instead of going through the conditional use process. Under the proposed ordinance, they wanted to do that type of use, they would still need to get conditional use and go through the conditional use process, which is a full public hearing with notice to the neighbors. And like I said, under the proposal, they would have to get a license if their conditional use was approved, and that license would require a local contact. You also heard testimony from a neighbor that did it the right way, that came through and got the conditional use permit and worked with their neighbors in the Nin neighborhood. And through that conditional use, there were limits placed on her bed and breakfast. She doesn't live there, but she has a caretaker. There was a limit on the number of folks, and there was assurances that parking was provided. And I believe it's worked out really well in that neighborhood. So that's a way a conditional use can really look at the specific proposals of a large short-term rental like that and determine if it's appropriate or not. So I know there's some confusion that the accessory short-term rentals, if that's allowed, would allow that type of use to just happen and be kind of a negative experience in some neighborhoods, but that's not what the proposal would allow. That's all I had prepared, and then we are happy to answer questions.
Let me make a suggestion. Could we start with one, see if you have questions or comments on it, and then go to the other, and maybe start with the one with 60 whatever percent. What's that called?
Accessory?
Accessory
short-term rental. That's where the owner or long-term renter lives in the house and rents up to 2 rooms at a time.
And I'll be listening for someone who can come up with a name for this that's better than accessory short-term rental. But
that is a common name in the planning world for it.
Planning world.
But planners are wonky and come up with not intuitive names sometimes. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Councilor Lewis, did you want to follow that one up?
Not on that subject.
Councilor Anderson.
Thanks, Lisa. This is helpful, but I'm still, and perhaps I was eating and didn't hear, but one of the issues raised was notice to the neighbors.
Yes.
That was raised by a number of neighborhood groups, and now I agree with the mayor. I mean, I would call these Airbnbs, but I know you can't because that's like calling something Xerox.
Right.
But I would call what has been the zone, the situation formerly known as B&B, I would continue to call it B&B just for simplicity, even though Bryce has told me you don't have to provide the B, but that'll be another issue. So could you talk a bit about notice in your response? I think particularly there was maybe the sort of notices you might have to say on a zoning change or a historic preservation issue or some other kind of quasi-judicial issue, which I think is 250 feet.
Right.
And that seems pretty big, but I know that's a concern of the neighborhoods.
So, right, as I went over, we are proposing in the supplemental staff report to send notice when we approve a license for short-term or accessory short-term rental. The license would go, notice would go to neighbors within 250 feet and the neighborhood association.
Okay,
it would
perfect.
list who the local contact is and the website where that information would be kept kept up to
Then,
date.
I think you also talked last time and this time about posting a notice, if they're not in town, the person they could contact, and back then I wasn't sure where their notice was, and I'm still not sure now where the notice is supposed to be, that notice.
So we would keep that on the city website, and then
Okay.
when we send that initial notice to the neighbors, we would give them information about how to find that website.
Perfect,
And let them know
perfect.
that would be updated yearly with the annual renewal.
That's a terrific solution, thanks.
Great.
Any other questions? This is the sort of rental light portion.
Rental light, yes.
Okay? Yeah, Counselor Kaiser.
Thank you. So I have a question, and I don't know if it falls under the accessory short-term rental or probably does. I see that guest houses and ADUs are excluded from rental. It's just the room and the main area of the home. And as far as my interpretation of why is because an ADU is like a full-blown residence. We want to increase the number of, the inventory of residences in Salem, and that's one way of getting at it. But could you explain what the difference between, say, an ADU and a guest house is? And
Yes.
I'm wondering if that difference involves a kitchen.
Yes. Yes, you were well informed, Counselor. So accessory dwelling units, as you all know, are not currently permitted, but will be coming to the council soon. And our proposal is that allowing accessory dwelling units is really to increase housing choices for residents of Salem. It is not intended to provide another way for people to rent this kind of short-term rental and turn it into that type of use instead of long-term housing. A guest house is permitted today, and you can build one in your backyard. And it can have a bathroom or kitchen, but not both, because the idea is that whoever is staying there is dependent on the main house, so it's truly your guest. So they're your guest, and you don't mind if your in-laws come in and use the bathroom or kitchen or something like that. And there's a limit on the amount of time per year that you can have a guest there. Now, we had originally proposed in the ordinance not to allow short-term rentals in the guest house, but I think we were just thinking that you wouldn't have a guest there and then have 2 more rooms rented in your house. And so we would propose, and I think we sent a draft motion around that would change that to say that you could rent 2 rooms, and if they're in a guest house or the main house or a combination, that would be fine, because a guest house is meant for guests.
Yeah,
So-
because I would think nobody's going to live long-term in a guest house. I mean, you really can't.
Right.
I mean, they shouldn't be
Yeah, they should
living
not be.
long-term in a guest house, but.
They should not be, yes.
Right, so the way I understand it then is you could rent out up to 2 guest rooms, and in a accessory short-term, in one of those rooms could be a guest house.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
That, if somebody makes the motion
Okay.
that's provided tonight, then that would be a change we would make.
I think that'd be a
You
good,
have it spotted, which motion?
I will find it, but I think that would be a good one
Number 4?
to make.
Okay.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other questions in this area? Counselor Nate?
More so doing with licensing, and I actually like number 6 here, as far as only requiring inspections of the short-term rentals. Because if they're through a system, people aren't going to come back and stay there if there's issues. That being said, I also know how busy our inspectors are, and the wording was as time permits, which could mean they never get inspected anyway, and so to have that on there, if there's a problem with a locality, how would you deal with that? Similar to a complaint basis that we use on a lot of other zoning and code enforcement.
So the proposal would require an inspection once every 5 years of the accessory, so that's where it's your house and you're renting 2 rooms. Now, I think part of that would be solved by the market. As you heard from the testimony of folks that are doing Airbnb, if their house isn't in great shape, they're going to get a bad review. But part of the inspection really does have to do with safety, that you as a traveler, when you come to town and you rent this room, that if there's a fire, that the smoke detector works, that there's a fire extinguisher, that the windows are big enough that you can get out of, which somebody may not, living in their house, maybe they have all that, maybe they don't, and it could be really bad to find out, when you find out that those things weren't provided as you thought, like they are in a regular hotel. So part of the inspection really is for safety and not just for, is there mold in the bathroom or something like that. We would propose that they self-certify until the first year to get their license, and then we would inspect every 5 years. Now, we do have limited staff, and I think you heard about that through the budget process of this last public hearing. We have one multifamily inspector that's inspecting all the hotels, motels, room and board, homeless facilities, and apartments. But we do have money in our budget to do a study of that entire program and see if there's a better way to run it, whether that's different fees, more staff, running the program differently. And so we're going to be looking at that as soon as the new fiscal year starts. And this would be part of that program.
If I can follow up on that for just a second. So I like the self-certification piece. It makes it nice and easy. Would there be a way, again, rather than actually doing that inspection, we know those items we're looking for, protection, fire protection, and what have you, to just require them to have a posting on the wall in that room that says these are the things that are supposed to be required of here. So if you have an undersized window or something and somebody, it's like, I don't know if I could get out of that window if I really needed to where it's like, contact the city of Salem if any of these criteria don't apply or something. Or aren't
Perhaps we could.
apparent.
We were assuming for the self-certification, we would list all of the things that we are requiring of them, and they would initial that, yes, I certify I have those, so at least they've thought about them. So
Yeah,
they
but
know
then the
what they
guests
are.
also know what those requirements
Right.
are, and if there's a concern that the owner may not be compliant with those, that there'd be that path back.
That is an option, yes.
Okay. Counselor Lewis?
Well, Lisa, I guess I need to apologize. I thought I was going to be talking about the short term, but I may be talking about the accessory. So let me put it this way. Which one or do both allow people to come and stay in the house and have the owner be gone?
Under the current proposal, they both allow it. Accessory allows it on a limited basis
Limited by maximum of 10.
and number of days per year that the owner could do it.
Okay.
Right.
The other?
The other is open to however they propose their use, and they have to go through a conditional use process if they're in the single-family zone. And then through that process, we determine how many rooms they're going to do, what the limit is.
Okay,
Maybe
so-
if they're not going to be there, they propose a caretaker, like the
Someone else.
resident in Court Chemeketa did.
Okay. So as a practical matter, both would allow it under my scenario is, and it's me. I've got a family with 5 brothers and sisters, and we try to get together on an annual basis for a reunion. And we all live in different parts of the country, and so we use vacation rental by owner. And so that's the example I'm using.
Yes.
Me. I think I heard you say that under one of these circumstances, there would need a parking requirement for each bedroom. So if I rented a house for my family that has 5 bedrooms, which is what we need, that place would have to have 5 parking places.
Correct.
Okay, just to point it out, and again, my example, people fly in, we meet them at the airport in a van, and there's 1 van at the house, maybe 2. 5 seems like a deal killer. I'm not going
Right.
to make 5 parking places.
That's the current code today, and that's been the code for bed and breakfast, short-term rental, since the 80s at least, so it's always required 1 per guest room, although they can apply for an adjustment and say, perhaps I will limit or let people know that are renting the house that they can't bring a car, 1 car per, whatever. So there's an option for them to do something less.
We've got about 10 minutes. Why don't we go to the next, if you don't mind, if we've exhausted this one, go to the, I think probably more controversial, which is the single-family home with no resident manager proposal. What did you call that?
Short-term rental?
Short-term rental.
So again, as a reminder, that's what's allowed today in the code, although we changed the name, and we weren't proposing to take away uses people can currently do in the single-family zone. And in fact, we didn't provide the right kind of notice. If we're going to take away uses people can do today on their property, it requires a special kind of notice under state law. So we did change the name and introduce a licensing requirement, but otherwise, since at least the early 80s, this is a use you can do in the single-family zone if you get a conditional use and go through that process, and that would remain under the proposal.
Of the 32%, or whatever that percentage was, how many are currently have been through the conditional use process?
Very few. We've had very,
Do you have a-
one or two conditional uses. over
One
the
or two
past year.
conditional uses. So these are not
Not legal.
legal now.
Or they're
Or they
in
could
a
be-
commercial or multifamily zone. They could be in a zone that doesn't
Oh, sure.
require the conditional use.
But I'm thinking of the ones in single-family zones. There's just a couple.
Right.
Yeah.
One both we've heard about, one
Yes.
from the owner, the other
Right.
from the neighbors.
Yep.
Okay.
It seems like the most controversial part is not the accessory short-term rental, so where the owner lives there, but the fact that we were going to allow them to be gone for part of the year and rent the entire house. And that's why we talked about in the report and the draft motions that the 95 days we propose seems like it's too many, and perhaps there's a feeling that it should either be eliminated or it should be 30 or 60 or something like that.
Counselor Cook.
Thank you. So, Lisa, for the short-term and the accessory short-term rental, I see you have the licensing and also the conditional use permit as the vehicle to kind of filter out and see who's interested in doing this. As part of that conditional use or licensing process, do you have a space to register if someone has been operating illegally or if they have had complaints? I'm interested to make sure that if someone is not holding up to the agreements in the neighborhood, that there is a tool to enforce that, to say you have to wait for a while or you're no longer able to do this.
So I think if this were approved by the council and people are coming in to go through the appropriate process, we would probably consider it a clean slate. Like a lot of the people that are operating today, even if they came to us, couldn't do it under the code the way they want to. And so we would lay out, whether they need a conditional use or just the license, we would lay out the requirements for them as part of them applying for and receiving that license. And then like any license the city approves or issues, there is a process every time we renew it to look at complaints. And see what's been happening, and there's a process to revoke that license if necessary.
Thank you.
Counselor Anderson.
Thank you. First of all, I apologize for leaving. I told this to the city attorney, but I'm in the middle of some tense negotiations on a legal business, and I may be leaving the council, excuse me, at some point during the meeting or now to finish those, so I apologize. And I hope if this was asked, just tell me. I'm curious about every year the licensing fee requirements, but a 5-year for the accessory dwellings, but a 5-year inspection ratio. And is part of the purpose of that fee to pay for the inspections?
So $100 of the $184.50 is the inspection.
Okay.
And so we could have a reduced fee for licensing when there's no inspection.
Well, and I sort of was wondering about maybe a 3-year, but what you run into that with the 3-year inspection is we run into staff time on that. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So I think I'm happy with what you proposed. The other thing, and I certainly have been wanting to talk about reducing the 90 days, and one very interesting statistic was that the average is 66 days a year. That
Hosts rent.
Yes, thank you. The situation formerly known as Airbnb
Yes.
rent, that averages 66 days a year. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Lewis, did you want to ask about this one? This is the small hotel in your neighborhood plan.
No, they're all, I'm not here.
Okay, Counselor Cook.
So with the 90 days, that's about, I'm just trying to think in school terms, a summer vacation, or if you look at some time for summer and some time for winter break. That 90 days is contiguous or not contiguous?
No, just total throughout the year.
And that's a calendar year?
Calendar year, and there was no great reason we picked 95. Portland had 95, and that seemed to be working for them at the moment, but perhaps it's too much for Salem. And we did hear through our outreach that there were people that wanted to do it and do the whole house, have some limited amounts without going through conditional use to rent their entire house. perhaps when they go on vacation somewhere.
Right.
It wasn't that they all said 95 was a really important day to them, just that, oh, I want to be able to do that once in a while in the summer or Christmas break or something.
Okay.
One factor I'd like you to just one more time reiterate so I understand it is in the current zoning pattern in town, this applies to single family only that we're talking about, or does it include other zones?
So you can do short-term rental in the multifamily zones and the commercial zones, whether you live there, you don't live there. You don't have to get a conditional use most of the time in those zones. So we're really trying to craft something that's smaller scale that you can do in the single-family zone without the conditional use permit, and that's accessory short-term rental.
Okay,
And
and
it's
the
really
other,
changed for the single family.
the other is in the single family as well?
It is, but only as a conditional use.
But only as a conditional use?
Correct.
Okay.
So again, if you're going to
But
do
is it
your-
allowed in a commercial zone?
It's permitted in a commercial zone, yes.
Okay.
Without the conditional use, yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilor.
Single family is always the most restrictive zone.
Right.
So it's the one where you either can't do something or you need a conditional use. So in this case, if you're doing that commercial type use, you need a conditional use.
So, Lisa, we got $100 of the 184 is the inspection. What's the other 84? How's that break out?
The building and safety staff who intake license at the PAC Center, the planning staff that will review the license to make sure you have all the required information together and actually issue it, and then $1,750 for the notice to the neighbors that we've issued a license.
Okay.
Any other, yeah, Councilor.
Would there be any way that that license could be applied for and issued online, or is that already factored in?
We do licensing. You can do renewals online, and maybe perhaps even the original. We are moving more towards doing everything online. You
Just
can
as
do
far
building
as that
permits online.
breakout of the $84 as far as PAC Center type processing.
It still takes staff time to, the way our online system works right now is they get the information by email and they still have to create what we call the folder in the system, and they still have to do some of that processing and send it out. It's not all automated at this point.
We can talk to our IT people and see if we can get some help over
We
time.
are
They're a
doing
pretty
an
cracked
upgrade to the
squad.
system in the next year or two, so that will help.
I think there's also things like checking for the insurance. You know, they have to look at what's submitted to make sure everything is there, and then, you know, so there's other things we have to look at to make sure it's relevant and valid.
Yes. Yeah.
And then one final question. As we take this up for deliberations after the public hearing tonight, is it, we can't take these up as two pieces. These are two pieces, right?
You mean short-term versus accessory short-term?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, we can do short-term and make its changes. Is it structured that way now? And we can take this,
so they're listed separately in the ordinance, but again, for short-term, really all we did was change the name and add a licensing requirement. So if you're going to add restrictions, we would want time to send the appropriate notice to everyone that owns property in the single-family zone to let them know you're going to restrict a use they can do today.
right.
Right.
But we can't take them up separately and work our way through them. It's trying to figure out how to
Yes.
work through these. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any further comments, questions, anything at all? Yeah.
I did have one, and maybe this is off-center, but seems to me that we allow certain businesses in residential areas like childcare, barbershops, just small businesses. In those instances, do we require notice to the neighbors when those businesses get a license or whatever?
No, we do not. And also, one thing to remember is if you live in a single-family zone now, you can have up to 2 people renting rooms in your house for long-term residential use with no special approval, no extra parking, no notice, if they're there more than 30 days at a time. That's been allowed in the zoning code for 50-plus years, so.
It's just if they want to stay longer, they gotta, if they're going to have people stay in their house longer, they need to let everybody know.
Under the current proposal, yes. Some of those commercial uses do require conditional use, but there are home occupations and other things you can do without notice in the single-family zone.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. For the audience, we're not taking public comment on this because we have a continuing public hearing on it, so people will get to testify during that. So we're not skipping, and that'll be coming up here in a few minutes. Okay, then the work session's adjourned. Okay. I'm going to call this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, May 22nd to order. And we'll begin with opening exercises, so we'll have a roll call.
Councillor Kaiser? Present. Councillor Anderson? Here. Councillor Nanke? Here. Councillor McCoy? Here. Councillor Ossig? I'll come back. Councillor Hoy? Here. Councillor Cook? Here. Councillor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett?
Here. Okay, would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Proclamation this evening. I wanted to invite up Salem Electric General Manager Terry Kelly and Board President Joe Van Meter. Yeah. Proclamation, whereas Salem Electric was incorporated in July 1938 as an electric cooperative, and whereas Salem Electric's lines were energized in April 1941 with 17 residential and 5 commercial members of the cooperative, and whereas in mid-1942 Salem Electric purchased the distribution system from founder Harry Reid and EF Electric, and whereas Salem Electric competed with Portland General Electric for customers and members until 1968 when a territorial agreement was signed, and whereas Salem Electric supports 5 goals: service reliability, financial integrity, good customer relations, good employee relations, and particularly low rates. And whereas the safety of its employees, members, and the public are an integral part of Salem Electric's safety culture, and whereas Salem Electric is committed to the efficient use of electricity and renewable energy, and whereas Salem Electric supports the communities it serves through volunteerism, donations, and sponsorships, now therefore I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim 2017 as Salem Electric's 75th anniversary and ask the community to celebrate the long-standing service and dedication to the community by Salem Electric, dated this 22nd day of May, signed Chuck Bennett, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, thank you so much for the recognition. I've been there about half of those 75 years, and I can say I've seen a lot of changes. One story I'd like to tell. It was back in the 40s when we were competing for customers with PGE, and we would, I think it was less than legal, I'll say, attach our lines to their poles to serve customers. The lines were cut down and we'd reattach them, usually in the darkness of night. At one point, our line crew was arrested, and when our founder, Harry Reid, went to bail them out, they kept Harry and released the line crew and said that he's the one they were after anyway. At this point, we have a great working relationship with PGE and the City of Salem, and we look forward to the future serving the cities of Salem and Kaiser. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for 75 years of great service.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Yeah, we saw what happened to Harry Reid. Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Councilor McCoy, approval of additions and deletions.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the additions to the agenda.
Second.
And those additions are, we've got under item 5A, a report was added, which is creation of City Council Transit Committee. Under 4A, there's an added attachment on a comparison chart that we saw. Under 4A, there was also added written testimony, and that's it.
Okay, any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. One more?
I'd like to also move that we reorder the agenda and move 4B ahead of 4A on the public hearings.
Second.
Second by Ossip. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, it's time for council and city manager comment. I'm going to just take a second to make a comment to thank the community for passing the police bond measure. It was a tremendous success, the entire election. Certainly all credit to the chairs of the committee to pass the police bond, Jerry Frank and former Mayor Janet Taylor, as well as their tremendous team, and particularly to our police chief, Jerry Moore. We couldn't have done it without him. I think he did a fantastic job. We're all very, very pleased, and just can't thank the community enough for making this really enlightened and important change to the city's infrastructure. I think they're going to be pleased with the building, the location, the level of service it will engender from our police department, and we're all just very pleased. Anyone else? Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that same line, I just wanted to say that this was rather disappointing to me when I saw it, the paper from last Friday, where it says city tows ethics line with election spots when we went forth and actually hit the Secretary of State's office up and showed exactly what we were going to do to have the newspaper come out and actually, for those headline readers, make it look like we were doing something nefarious. And so, never let a good crisis go unrecognized. But I think they did that on the previous election in November as well. I don't know why. But all their other spots have been supportive of the facility. So, again, I was disappointed to actually see that, because some of those folks, like me, wait till the last day and hand in their ballots. Just looking for those kind of things, with candidates or measures. So,
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I announced it at the work session, but I'll say it again. I'm still a practicing lawyer, and I'm in the middle of some very sensitive negotiations, and I'm going to leave right now to go call somebody, and I may have to leave during the council meeting at various times to continue those.
I'll miss you.
That could mean less questions, Mayor.
no polls, right?
Yeah, no polls.
No polls, there's a reason.
Councilor McCoy. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the mayor, who was back east in his hot and, as he told me, hot and humid atmosphere in Ohio, watching his granddaughter, or attending his granddaughter's high school graduation. Since he was out of town, I got to sit in for him on a couple of very fun events on Saturday afternoon. The first was the countrywide relays for the schools. It was, I remember that. I had a daughter that went all the way every year in grade school. She was one of the faster runners in her class all the way through. I went to that for 5 or 6 straight years when it was the JC relays. But 3,000 kids. It's running and all organized, and it's much more. It's an amazing organizational feat when you're herding around 3,000 elementary school children in the first place and getting them to the starting line on time and keeping them organized. But the Mayor's Mile, those are all 4x100 relays, just one lap around the field. But you have the Mayor's Mile. It's the oldest students in the 5th grade, and that's 4x400. So they're running a mile basically. Everybody runs a lap, and so I got to be the starter, shoot the gun and call them to their marks, and boom, and off they went running. And after it was over, I gave them their medals, put them around their necks. They all received a medal, 1 through 8, for both the boys and girls. And great fun and great atmosphere, and you can't help but be energized, because we could power the city with the energy if we could harness it in that stadium for that afternoon. I also then went over at 5 o'clock. There was a Veterans March as part of a national day for Veterans March on Washington that occurred many years ago on this day, and spoke on behalf of the city and the mayor and talked to the veterans there. Being a veteran, it was special for me, and it was probably not as well attended as I would like to see, but it was the first time we've tried it here in Salem, and I would say to the public and the folks here in the room, the veterans, things have changed from the time when I was growing up. I was drafted in 1970, and so our parents were basically World War II vets, and you came from an era when that was a national mission to win that war, and everybody was involved with rationing. Everybody had an uncle or a brother or a sister or an aunt that had served, and it touched pretty much everybody in the nation, and because of that, the veterans were really sort of venerated and really taken care of. Well, as we've gotten farther away from that, you can see I'm the oldest of, I've got 3 other brothers, none of whom served, because the draft ended about the time I was drafted. And so we've got generations here that haven't served and haven't been required to serve, and it's an all-volunteer army. And it's really changed the dynamic, and I think the way citizens look at veterans. So I told the organizer here, call me next year, I'll help them get more folks out there, because I think it is important. And we've got veterans coming from a very nasty kind of a war, sort of like Vietnam was, unheralded, coming back into life and struggling with the after effects of fighting those urban warfare sort of guerrilla type of battles, and it's not a good thing. And excessive numbers of suicides and struggling mentally to fit back into society. And so I would, everybody, I know we all appreciate them, but think an extra step sometimes and recognize those folks if you find out that you've got a veteran that served, because that means a real lot to a veteran that's really in this case, volunteered to go serve on a very difficult mission. So
Well,
that's it.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Counselor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apparently Saturday was the day to represent you, because I had the honor to represent you at an immigration forum and resource fair at McKay High School, and it was put on by the Salem-Kaiser Coalition for Equality. I was there with members of the Salem Police Department and the Marion County Sheriff's Office, and I think it was a great forum, really nice community event out of my neighborhood. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Oh, certainly, thank you. As Counselor McCoy mentioned, I was out of town in Ohio to watch a granddaughter graduate from high school. Wasn't going to miss that, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that I have such great support from counselors who are willing to do these jobs. They're great. And I'm really pleased that you enjoyed it so much, both of you. I think they always are. They're really one of the real benefits besides your wife's cookies to being mayor. So. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor McCoy, for your service. Thank you very much for that statement. I wanted to say that I had the pleasure of attending the partnership, the Capes Neighborhood Partnership Bike Rodeo on Friday at Washington Elementary School. And as far as the limitless energy of kids, there were over 200 people at the event. The fire department brought helmets. The police were there with the car, and also the police on bikes to do a little ride around the building. There was an obstacle course, a training on how to be safe and ride, and it was just fantastic. A wonderful community event. Chariots was there as well. It was a great example of what we can do in partnership with one another, and also something where when people want it, and when they go for it, it comes through. It's got that backing. And also just another plug for the Dan Burden event tomorrow on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to seeing many people there.
Okay, you'll see me.
Oh, yeah.
No more granddaughters to graduate. I'm in. Counselor Lewis.
Well, I was fortunate to attend last Tuesday the World Beat Mayors International Dinner, and the mayor was there. He was the MC of the show, and it was a tremendous turnout. There must have been well over 120 people at the dinner. It was interesting to me. It reminded me of being in New York City when you go up against the wall of a building, close your eyes, and just listen to all the different dialects that walk by. It was exactly like that last Tuesday night. It was great to see. And I'm also going to mention this, and I may for quite a while until they close it and then open it again. But the Mento Island Bridge, if you have not been across it, you're missing one of the neatest adventures in life. I was on it one day last week when it was a little cloudy and a little windy, and I actually had the bridge for 30 seconds to myself. There was nobody on the bridge, and there was nobody on the pathway into the park. It lasted 30 seconds, and then the people came back. But the birds were going crazy because of the wind. They must not have much tolerance. Anyway, it was an exciting day. And so for anybody who hasn't been on that bridge, you got to do it.
How soon do they have to do it, Peter? When will you be closing it again?
Probably right on June 1st. We want to get that stuff out of the water, finish up, and reopen so that. And the opening celebration is set for Wednesday, August 2nd. So we want to get in and get out. There's painters out there, so there's work actively being done to move things along. But there's the last of the concrete then that has to be poured so that all the walkways along the park are done. But I'm glad that people are enjoying it. My family and I were out there yesterday, 6 o'clock, 6:30, and it was just packed with people.
So we'll have all of Memorial Day weekend to...
Absolutely.
Okay, enjoy.
Absolutely.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. A lot going on. And then we have representatives from the Energy Trust of Oregon who are going to make a presentation. why don't you come on up here? We've got a mic, and you can, everybody can.
I'll just give a short presentation. And my name is Jue Zhao, and good evening, Mayor and councilors. And I work for Public Works Department, and I'm the wastewater treatment division manager over there. And just a little bit introduction for our folks for the ETO. And so back to 2.5 years ago, on December 1st, 2014, and the Energy Trust of Oregon awarded a rebate check to us for the amount of almost $500,000. And Mayor Bennett, if you recall, you are the one who received that check on behalf of us that time. So continue to benefit from that project, and together some in-house process optimization, we actually able to identify another energy saving project, which is today we are going to present to everybody. It's a blower upgrade project. So in this project, we replaced a 30-year-old 400 horsepower blower with a much higher efficient 200 horsepower blower. So, and the blower was put in service this February, and it's been running very smoothly since then. And I am engineer, so I believe data talks, so please allow me to share some of the data here about this project. So this project is around $215,000, and the incentive we're going to receive from ETO is over $100,000. So I like to do the math, so which means almost 50% of this project is sponsored by the Energy of Trust. And not only that, we are also talking about an ongoing annual electrical saving over almost $33,000 every year. So that's very significant. And the payback period is around a little bit over 3 years. So just rule of thumb for everybody, and a blow project, and typical the payback is from 3 to 9 years. So you can see a little bit over 3 years how good we are to stay on top of this project. And not only all this financial benefit we are talking about, just imagine the savings, the cutting reduction of the power we are being doing every year. That's very beneficial for our environment. And I really want to take this opportunity also to acknowledge several key staff at the plant, and also our engineering staff and our engineering division, because without them, I'm not able to stand here and share this great project with everybody. So first people I'd like to thank is Bob Whitney, and he is our instrumentation and electrical supervisor, and he is our key staff, worked very close with Energy of Trust, and from the project and scope to the funding availability. And second person I'd like to acknowledge is Glenn Putman. He's not here, and he's our mechanical supervisor, and he is very shy, so he said that he'd rather stay at home, watch the video. Yeah, so he worked actually side by side with Bob Whitney. We did all the installation in-house, so we're talking about another at least $50,000 saving, because we did all this in-house rather than have to contract out, have a contract to do it. And Stephanie Eisner, she's not able to make it here as well. She's our operations manager, so the saving I just mentioned, part of them is due to the effort she put in, stay on top of the process optimization. And another person I'd really like to thank is Ben Haney, and he's our project manager. He worked very close with our consulting firm from the selection of the blower and to the procurement, and provide us a great engineering support to the staff. And as always, we are continuing to look for the improvement, and whether it's energy saving or the process optimization, we will always look the best for our city, for the environment, and for our residents. So with all that said, I'd like to introduce Jay Ward, and he is our folks with Energy Trust of Oregon, and he worked to align this Energy Trust program with Oregon business and the community needs. And he's here to share his view about this project and the partnership with Willow Lake Wastewater Treatment Division. Thank you.
Great,
Jay.
thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and good evening, Mayor Bennett, councilors. Jay Ward, Senior Community Relations Manager with Energy Trust of Oregon. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues, Eric Braddock and Kevin Campbell, from our technical side. If you have difficult questions about this particular project, I'll direct them to my colleagues. For those of you who are not familiar with Energy Trust, we are an independent nonprofit who works to help the customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural Gas, Cascade Natural Gas, and Avista save energy and money. Importantly for this evening's presentation, our energy saving work relies upon the ratepayers of Portland General Electric, so I'm pleased that PGE has a couple of folks that were able to make it. Teresa Haskins, who's their business markets manager, and key customer manager Tim Custer are with us tonight. And I want to thank PGE because without them we could not do this work, and I don't think we could help your staff do it either. So I'm pleased to be here to commend the City of Salem for doing what citizens want their governments to do, and that's to do more with less. Your Public Works Department and the Willow Lake Operations team takes their stewardship of the citizens' financial and water resources seriously, and the project we're highlighting this evening is the latest in an impressive list of money and energy-saving upgrades that we've worked together on. In fact, the most recent project is a perfect example of what is sometimes known as a virtuous circle of benefits. As Ms. Zhao mentioned, back in 2012, the Willow Lake facility was working, and working quite well, but not as efficiently as it could. Your team engaged Energy Trust at that time to conduct a study and identified a number of savings upgrades that could be implemented. A new blower was identified at that time, but your system capacity wasn't up to it at that point, and it would have required a significant investment on the part of the city to upgrade that infrastructure. But by upgrading the diffusers and oxygen controls back in 2012, you actually saved enough energy to not have to do that. So that's why we're here tonight celebrating it. 2 years ago, my colleague at that time, J.P. Botmal, presented a check to you. Tonight, I'm happy to be following in his footsteps. This ceremonial check, you have a hard time finding an ATM, is big in several respects. It's obviously big at over $100,000. It complements a significant investment by the City of Salem in better water and better service for Salem's ratepayers. And it shows how investments by the city and by Energy Trust can benefit all PGE ratepayers, helping the utility to better manage its expenses. But there are some numbers that aren't on the check. 500,000 kilowatt hours of electricity saved per year. That's enough electricity to power 56 homes for a year. Put another way, the one project avoids 3,200 tons of carbon dioxide being emitted, roughly the equivalent of taking 569 cars off the road for a year. And lastly, a number that Ms. Zhao mentioned earlier, but which bears repeating, it's about $32,000 in annual bill savings that the city will not be paying for as long as this particular measure operates. I think I'm told that the previous blowers have been there 30 years. So your payback on this, you will be, it's the opposite upside down. You'll be right side up in 3 years and be saving $32,000 a year for every year after that, just from this one project at this one facility. It would not have happened without the city's dedicated energy team, and while some names have been made, I'd like to repeat them. Public Works Director Peter Fernandez, I saw the video 2 years ago when JP presented the check, and he was kind enough to feature at that time. Electrical Supervisor Bob Whitney, who's been called out, my co-presenter Ms. Zhao, and Stephanie Eisner, who couldn't make it tonight, as well as Glenn, who apparently is shy, and Ben Haney, who might feature in future big check presentations. Because while we've been talking about saving energy, I'd also like to thank City Council for giving your staff and empowering them to talk about improving your energy generation. Willow Lake actually has an anaerobic digestion function out there that generates electricity. And our renewable energy team tells me that you're well on your way to doubling the capacity, generation capacity at that site, and that Portland General Electric has awarded you all a grant to help make that happen. Energy Trust is also engaged in that effort, and I eagerly anticipate appearing before you at a future date to present an even bigger check celebrating that project and the city's commitment to energy use. And since it's impolite to filibuster your friends, it's now my pleasure to just present the big check, and congratulations. I will not tell you to spend it wisely because I think you already have.
Well, thank you very much to Energy Trust, and also congratulations to our Willow Lake team and our Public Works Department for continuing year after year to amaze us with these new and innovative programs to deal with whether it's CO2 emission or power generation or taxpayer savings and ratepayer savings. We just can't congratulate you enough, so thank you very much.
In line turbine next.
Well, it's opportunity for public comment. I have 3 people signed up. I'll remind you, you have 3 minutes to speak. At 2 minutes, the yellow light will turn on. That means you have 1 minute left. When the red light goes on, it's easiest if you just stop talking, and I won't then have to ask you to stop talking. It's just, so finish up right then and you're done. And remember to tell us who you are, either your address or your ward number. So first is Rebecca McCann.
Hello, my name's Rebecca McCown, and I'm the council coordinator for the North Santiam Watershed Council, which is 284 East Water Street in Staten, Oregon. So I believe you guys have our annual report in your packet. In 2015 and 2016, the North Santiam Watershed Council has participated in 2 watershed scale planning efforts. These involved a large amount of stakeholders and partners. One is the North Santiam Drought Contingency Planning effort, as well as the partners of the North Santiam Basin Resiliency Action Planning process. These are stakeholders working together collaboratively to prepare for restoration for the whole watershed. In addition, the council has implemented 2 large-scale riparian restoration projects during this time period in the lower North Santiam. One is above Staten, which is the Birdhaven Slough, and one is Deekman Creek Restoration Project, which is below Staten. We also continued plant establishment efforts on restoration projects on Snake to Ford, Alder Creek, Valentine Creek, Stout Creek, and Bear Branch. The North Santiam is able to implement large-scale restoration projects with landowners by leveraging resources and multiple funding sources. We have OWEB grants, restoration grants, capacity grants, a Meyer Memorial Trust Fund, BLM Title II funding, as well as we receive a City of Salem grant. In addition to these grant funds, we receive a donation from the City of Albany and from the City of Salem. We also receive several private donor donations. And one we've been receiving for the past couple of years is from New Hampshire. So it's kind of, they're wanting to protect our watershed. The 2016 $10,000 donation that the City of Salem gave to the Watershed Council was spent on riparian site prep, native plant material, planting and plant establishment activities. Funds were spent on projects above Guerin Island, so on Snake to Ford, which is in Mill City, Alder Creek, and the Birdhaven Slough. For the 2017, this is not in the annual report, we planted approximately 70,000 trees and shrubs on 77 riparian acres. 6,000 of those trees were donated by the Marion County Free Tree Program. So again, that's an example of how we leverage resources. So thank you for your donation. One last note, I wanted to state that in the annual report, we were able to extend our service area to include Pringle Creek and Mill Creek areas. We are working with those organizations already working in those areas, such as Marion Soil and Water Conservation District and the Pringle Creek Watershed Council, to provide additional capacity.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming down, Rebecca. I'm chair of said organization. She does a wonderful job. Kara is our alternate for that as well. So we're right in the middle of strategic planning as well, so it fit in nicely with the city's process, and I think we'll be meeting again here with the South Santiam Watershed Council. We working at it in a joint capacity as well. So
great.
Protecting the water. In the July meeting, they'll be talking, staff from the city will be coming and talking about the Bennett dams, Upper and Lower Bennett, which protect our drinking water intake as well. So a lot of good information always on Detroit Reservoir, what they're doing, because they impact our ability on our agenda tonight is curtailment potentials. So always good to know what's going on above us as well, so.
Well,
thank you, Rebecca.
and also, members of the council are going to be taking a tour of the whole Guerin Island
Right.
plant, essentially, the whole project up there. Hopefully get a good look at Upper and Lower Bennett Dam. And
Yeah.
explain
And from there,
what
I
we
think you
need
can
to do
actually see
there.
Birdhaven as well, which is the one project Rebecca mentioned on the opposite side of the river.
And we just submitted a Lower Bennett Dam alternative analysis grant proposal to OWEB, so we'll find out this summer if that gets funded.
Great. Good news. Thank you very much. Richard Koenig.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Koenig.
I have less than good news. About a year ago, I started asking for the properly delegated authority that Salem claims to possess to write trafficking tickets to the general public. Judge Aiken was asked. Deputy Chief Belshaw, Chief of Police, was asked. And finally, in August, I asked City of Salem Council. Inspection of public records is a right the people have. Not only the people, but persons who are corporate entities as well. The public record law is encoded at ORS 192.420. This citation was frequently used. No such public record, also known as law, was ever produced. The felony crime of racketeering is being committed by certain officers of City of Salem, as established by acquiescence. And your duty as officers, public officers, includes to correct me if I'm wrong on this. Consequently, City of Salem Attorney Dan Atchison instructed city personnel not to talk to me. He also, apparently unilaterally, banned me from City of Salem property with the exception of attendance at city council meetings. I responded that I could be persuaded to go along with this in exchange for $1,000 a month. This suggestion was rejected, so Dan Atchison has most recently been asked to come to this meeting prepared to answer the following questions posed hereunder as request for public records pursuant to 192.420. Provide the public record for my inspection that properly delegates authority to Dan Atchison to ban the people, including me, from the City of Salem public property. Provide the public record for my inspection that describes my actions which may, but may not be, legitimate grounds for banishment from City of Salem public property. Provide for my inspection the public record that informs the people just how long Police Department of City of Salem's Internal Affairs Unit has to determine whether Deputy Chief Belshaw has deliberately engaged in misrepresentation of a material fact when he said that the authority to cite the general public for trafficking offenses, quote, is in a recent revision of the vehicle code. I made my complaint to the Internal Affairs in October of last year. The Oregon Evidence Code says evidence willfully suppressed.
I'm
is
sorry,
adverse
Mr.
to the
Koenig.
party
Mr. Koenig, your
suppressing.
time's up. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Rick Yerk.
Good evening. On a little lighter note, perhaps. Anyways, good evening, Council and Mayor Bennett. I am Rick Yerk, current chairman of the Public Art Commission here in Salem. So of the Council, how many of you knew you had a Public Art Commission? Please show of hands. That's awesome. That's very good. Let the vote show that was unanimous.
Yeah, we watch you closely, Mr.
Okay, well, I'm here this evening. I know our packet, our annual report is part of your packet, and hopefully you've reviewed that, or at least taken a glance at it. I'm here this evening to give you an update on 3 exciting art projects that are about to take place in our fair city. This past January, the Downtown Advisory Board empowered our commission with funding to do 2 murals downtown, specifically on the Chemeketa Parkade. So I'll tell you a little bit about those. Mural number 1 is going to be painted on the east side of the parkade, just north of Chemeketa Street on the stairwell elevator shaft. This will be a large 4-story, multiple-side mural by artist Blaine Fontana, and it's titled Waldo Stewart's. This realistic work, with a touch of pop culture whimsy, honors Salem's smallest city park and its lone tree, a giant sequoia that was planted in 1872. Mural number 2 is by artist Damian Gilly. It's titled Mere Maze. This mural will cover an entire wall in the alley between Chemeketa and Court Street, just to the south of mural number 1. Damian's work uses color, bold linear shapes, and the structure of the wall or building itself to create engaging illusions of dimension and space. Both of these artists are young, they're active, they're sought after, they have outstanding reputations, and we're just really excited that both of them are going to be working here in Salem this summer. And there is a public hearing on both of these sculptures, on both of these murals, excuse me, on June 8th. So mark your calendars. Okay, the third highlight, and this is breaking news, is the addition of a new sculpture which will also be placed downtown in one of the art wells that have been built into the sidewalks. This sculpture is by artist Mel Katz. Mel Katz is a Portland artist and educator, and he's been active in the Northwest art scene for the past 60 years. I mean, this is really an amazing artist. Mel's work as a painter and sculptor focuses on simple, abstract compositions of bold shapes and bright colors. This sculpture is made of laser-cut steel. It's then painted and then assembled. Other pieces by Mel Katz can be seen in the Hallie Ford Museum of Art here in Salem, the Portland Art Museum, the Seattle Art Museum, the Tacoma Art Museum.
I'm afraid your time's up.
Okay, thank you. But let me remind you that Thursday, June 8th, there will be a public hearing, and we'd love to have your support. Thank you.
And where will the sculpture be located? Did you say?
It's hopefully, and it hasn't been finalized yet, but hopefully it'll be on Chemeketa and Liberty. The southwest corner of Chemeketa and Liberty.
Oh, great.
So what we're trying to do a little bit is activate that Chemeketa space and some of the alley spaces that, pedestrian-friendly alley spaces that are downtown. So
great.
A little bit of clustering. That'll be the third piece now that the Public Art Commission has placed downtown.
Yes.
The Q, as you are aware of, at State and Liberty. And then there's also the Leroy Setzel carved boulders that are on Trade and Liberty.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for your...
Councilor Anderson has a question.
And thank you, Mr. Yerk, for coming down. I really appreciate the work you've done. I have a couple questions. Where is all this art stored?
Where is it stored?
I mean, because I look at a list here and you've got
most
3 or 4
of
pages.
it's in hanging somewhere.
Okay,
or
so
positioned somewhere.
there's hardly any stored. Okay, that's very good. Yeah, and I also appreciate the fact that you're having a public hearing on the artwork. I think that's terrific, and thank you again for all your work.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The consent calendar, Councilor McCoy.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the consent calendar.
Hoy? You second? Okay, sorry. Councilor Hoy. Second that. Okay, sorry.
Want me to speak to it?
Go ahead.
Okay, we've got the minutes of the May 6th council work session and the May 8th city council meeting. And under action items, we've got And we ratify the city manager's execution of the attached amendment of an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Corrections, which extends the term of the equipment space lease, where we are placing equipment that's used with our police communications on Department of Corrections land, and it changes the terms of the lease. Moving forward, it's a 2-year lease, and then it becomes ongoing from there. We've got the Chemeketa Parkade lease to Rudy Steakhouse LLC and a recently vacated restaurant position. We've got amendment of an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Oregon to provide plan review and inspection services. That has been ongoing since for the last 12, 15 years, and that continues. And finally, we've got the reappointment of Deborah Wilson as a municipal judge pro tem, and she's been in that position for quite some time, and it's another 2-year term.
You just buzzed by that Rudy Steakhouse news, huh?
Yeah.
So where is that, Councilor?
That's, as I understand it, that's in the old
McGrath?
Yeah.
McGrath space. Yeah.
Oh, that's just real interesting news. If we had a reporter here, we'd get that in the paper.
Yeah, you knew I was going to talk about the paper.
Yeah. Okay, any questions, comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we have reorganized the public hearings. We'll begin with the item 4B, the utility code.
Okay. The City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding proposed amendments to the utility code, amending Salem Revised Code, Chapters 70, 70A, 71, 72, and 73. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons.
Yeah, go. Whenever your PowerPoint's ready.
Just give it some time.
How complicated is this PowerPoint?
It is progress.
Oh.
Wham that one.
There we go.
Can we cut the lights on one side?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Jason Pulley. I'm a utilities planning coordinator with City of Salem Public Works. Tonight, I'm here for the public hearing on revisions to Salem Revised Code, Chapters 70 through 73, which we refer to as the utility code. Just for some familiarity, Chapters 70 through 73 deal with the operation of the city's utilities. Chapter 70 refers to the general utility operation. 70A is for streetlights. 71 is for stormwater. Chapter 72 deals with the water system, and Chapter 73 deals with our wastewater system. A couple of years ago, we undertook a comprehensive look at the utility code with the idea that we want to make sure that the code is up to current practices and that it meets the needs of the utility going forward. The main purpose that we landed on for the revisions that we've presented is to provide some consistency in the utility code chapters as they appear in Salem Revised Code. We want each chapter to have a uniformity, so there's a good flow between the chapters of the utility code. There were a lot of repetitive elements, including definitions in each individual chapter, certain procedures that applied to all utilities that were repeated in each chapter. There was a lot of extra detail that was in code that staff felt that did not necessarily need to be in code. And we're talking about issues that could be anything from the standard size of pipe that we put in the ground to the spacing of fire hydrants. So we felt that these types of elements were more suited for things like our public work design standards and not necessarily rise to the level of actually needing to be in code. And the other thing we did as pulling out some of those pieces is that we developed administrative rules, which are also in your packet tonight as an information report. Tonight you have 3 administrative rules that are accompanying these changes to the utility code. And this is to make sure that there's no gap in coverage. So utility code revisions hopefully will go to second reading on the 22nd, along with the adoption of the administrative rules. So it should be a seamless transition from moving elements out of Salem Revised Code and into administrative rules. The total of revisions that we're presenting can seem quite ominous because it's a 72-page ordinance bill. So one of the purposes of the hearing tonight is essentially to walk through some of the major changes and some of the thought process that have gone into these revisions that we're repeating. And I would like to point out that in the ordinance bill itself, you will see a lot of deletions. And you will see that some of the chapters, particularly like Chapter 72, for instance, that deals with water, went from somewhere around a 16 to 18-page ordinance chapter to which is now about 3.5 pages. And this is not to overly simplify what we're doing, but this is just an example of how we have consolidated some of the elements that were existing in each chapter, how we've moved things out of code, and then how we've made each chapter kind of stand alone and deal only with that particular piece of the utility. As part of the revision process, we engaged staff throughout Public Works, Operations, Engineering, Administration. We worked on these revisions, like I said, over the course of a couple of years. Once we got it to a point where we thought we were ready to bring these revisions to council, we formed a ad hoc committee consisting of 4 city councilors and a member of the Water Wastewater Task Force, and we walked through each chapter to make sure that we were addressing all the concerns that may be brought up by council, that we weren't doing anything that would be alarming to either council or to staff or to the customers of the utility. And we also sent notice of these proposed changes to all of the neighborhood associations to allow them to have comment. So moving directly into the individual chapters, I will just touch on some of these changes very briefly. Chapter 70, as I mentioned, is the general utility chapter. The main purpose of this chapter, as it exists, as it will exist with the proposed code revisions, it will house all of the definitions that cover or that occur throughout the utility code. And it also sets our standards for construction inspection and things like that. So things that apply to all of our utilities, be it streetlights, stormwater, water, or wastewater, will be housed in SRC Chapter 70. And SRC Chapter 70 also gives authority for the city's utility billing program. The details of that utility billing program have been moved out in one of the administrative rules on your agenda tonight. We've also removed specific grant programs from the code, and Chapter 70 now contains a general provision that allows the director or the city manager to establish grant programs as deemed necessary and to develop rules to administer those grants. And we also did some work in the utility billing language that clarifies how payments are applied. It's not it wasn't necessarily clear, and so we've added some clarification to those. Chapter 70A is streetlights, and this is a very new chapter in the utility code. As you know, it sets the streetlight fee and allows us to bill and collect that. It also covers how we operate the streetlight system. So really, changes to Chapter 70A were very minor. Definitions were removed. We made sure that the style conformed to the new style that we've adopted for the utility code. And it does retain the authority to do a streetlight only utility bill, which we don't currently practice, but it was decided that that is something that we wanted to retain the authority to implement should we ever decide that that is the right way to go. As it is right now, you do not get billed for a streetlight fee unless you have another utility account, be it stormwater, water, wastewater, whatever it may be. So right now there are no streetlight only utility bills. Again, Chapter 71 is stormwater. This is a relatively new code as well. It was adopted in 2013. So the content of Chapter 71 was pretty much up to date with our current standards and practices. So the changes made in Chapter 71 mainly dealt with moving definitions out and removing some repetitive elements, but the substance of Chapter 71 essentially stays the same. SRC Chapter 72 deals with water. For those that were on the council, you remember a few years ago we did a comprehensive update to the Unified Development Code. This now covers how our water system and our wastewater system, basically our utility system, is extended to meet current development. There were a lot of elements that were still existing in Chapter 72 that dealt with the extension of the water system. So those were removed and are now covered by the UDC. Connections, size of mains, as I mentioned earlier, things of that nature were taken out and are now contained in Public Works design standards, which are an administrative rule. And we removed the cross-connection control and the water curtailment program pieces out of code, and those are the other two administrative rules that are on the agenda tonight. SRC Chapter 73 is wastewater, and again, the deletions were quite massive on this chapter, but they were basically removal of repetitive elements. Half of the existing Chapter 73 as it exists today deals with stormwater, which is no longer necessary since we have a standalone stormwater chapter. Again, details of connections and how the system is built are removed from SRC Chapter 73 and are now in administrative rules with the Public Works design standards. And we also did some clarification language in the code itself to lay out the responsibility of wastewater laterals, which is sometimes a very confusing subject for homeowners and other customers that assume that a lateral connecting to the wastewater main is the city's responsibility, when in fact the customer is responsible for that lateral all the way to the main. And I just wanted to briefly mention the administrative rules that we have proposed for adoption. The first is utility billing, which lays out the policies and procedures and how the utility billing program operates. The second is the cross-connection control program, which is a state-mandated program under the Safe Drinking Water Act that requires the city to perform certain measures to prevent cross-contamination of the water system from customers' systems. And the third is the water curtailment plan, which sets stages and proactive measures that the city will implement in times of water shortages. And again, this too is a state-required program, and it's detailed in the city's water management and conservation plan. But one of the requirements is that the city have authority to implement that. And so that's what the administrative rule will do. We'll set those stages and give the city the authority to implement curtailment measures. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations to you and your committees for all the work you've done pulling this together. Are there any questions? Councilor McCoy.
Just a comment. I served on that committee, and they did a ton of work. And
Public?
Public?
Do we have any public?
Any public comment?
Testimony?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
And this is so much more user-friendly, easy to read, easier to understand. And if you could see, literally, the sections that came out of the old code and what we've ended up with, it was well overdue, but the staff did a wonderful job, and all we did was nitpick a little bit and tell them, good on you, and let's go get this thing passed.
Councilor Anderson.
Thanks. I'm sorry I talked about public hearing. I'm shocked that no one wanted to come and talk about this particular subject before us tonight. But I do have a question, and that is, I sort of had a general question as I was going through all the items on agenda item 6, and my question was, why are we doing all these administrative rules right now? And I've got my answer.
Yeah.
But I do have a question about the one, if you could put up the last slide, please. It was about water curtailment and, yeah, water curtailment. So I was interested to hear, because when I saw that, I'm wondering, why are we doing that now? And your answer is, we're doing it now because state law requires us to do it.
Correct.
So we're not doing this because we are anticipating something's going to happen in the near future where we're going to need to actually take those measures.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Good job.
Yeah, very good. Councilor McCoy?
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we will now go to our continuation of our public hearing on short-term rental development standards and licensing requirements.
The City Council will now hold a public, excuse me, the City Council will now continue a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding proposed amendments to Salem Revised Code to establish development standards and licensing requirements for short-term rentals and accessory short-term rentals.
Thank you. Are we going to have any staff
don't have anything to present besides what we did at the work session.
At the work session, all right?
Happy to answer questions.
Very good. Okay, we will bring, let's go. These poor folks, been so patiently waiting. Sorry.
I like the size of it.
Leah Rainier.
Is it the same, are you going to blink me or?
I'm going to blink you. I'm going to tell you all that when you get up there. So remember, when it turns yellow, 1 minute. When it turns red, just stop talking. And then your name and either your address or your ward.
My name is Leah Gaynor. I'm a resident of the Highland neighborhood, Ward 1. I'm very excited to talk to you, so I'll have to revisit the utilities ARs at another time. So I'm here to ask for changes to the proposed accessory short-term rental amendment for the city of Salem. Specifically, I was very concerned with line 21, section 8B structure types, which I believe was addressed during the work session as a misunderstanding regarding guest houses. So hopefully that will
helped us on that.
Yeah, hopefully that'll be taken care of because guest houses are different than accessory dwellings. And I did submit written testimony about that. And then the second thing that I wanted to propose was creating an exception pathway for owners that already have buildings on their properties, or like a grandfather clause, perhaps, or at least an avenue for people that have appropriate structures to use for short-term rentals. The parameters for licensing and inspection are already in place in the proposed amendments, but what's missing is a pathway for exceptions. So I'd like to suggest that that be added, so people could take advantage of that if they did have something that would be deemed appropriate through inspection or the licensing process.
Can you describe, are you done?
Not entirely, but I can.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and I'll ask.
I can pause while you question me.
Go ahead, I apologize. Never mind.
Okay, I'm open to, okay. Give me more time, Mayor Bennett, okay. And then I just wanted to point out that short-term rental hosts are providing a service to our community, not taking something away. Per Airbnb, which I spoke to them the other day, there's only 75 active hosts in our community. That's 75 people. So I know we're having a lot of discussion about putting a lot of restrictions and preemptive restrictions and some sort of arbitrary ones, like who can go on vacation and for how long. But I would just really urge the council or people that are doing this to speak to people that are actually involved in the sharing community before setting parameters. You can read my written testimony about why I got into it and why it's very important to me. It's my income, it's my dream. It's been wonderful. I see that I'm on a yellow light. So I also just wanted to share that one of the wonderful things and the wonderful people that we've met doing this, a couple just got engaged in our guest house last weekend. And so again, we're giving something back to the community. We host military families with, 4 dogs that are in transition. A lot of people that need a private space that a hotel, these folks weren't going to get engaged at Motel 6 on Lancaster. So, well, they could, but, it wasn't as charming. So, it's really important to me. I've always wanted to be a proprietor. It's been my dream. And I just would really appreciate your support on this and working with people that are involved in the sharing community and not just kind of going into people that are fearful.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Could you, on the grandfathering is what I was interested in.
Yes.
What kind of structure are you talking about grandfathering in? I'm not sure I understood.
Well, for instance, I live in the Highland neighborhood, and so my home is a vintage home. So I have a 1920s Craftsman, and I had a very old, I don't know what it was, barn, shop, garage for maybe a Model T, I don't know. But on my block alone, there's 5 ADUs there already. They've been there, whether they're used for short-term, long-term, visiting people, but they're already on the properties. And so that's what I mean by grandfather clause, or perhaps when we institute the licensing process, people that already have things that are set up and ready to go, just to give them a path. Does that make sense, a pathway for an exception?
Yeah. I do understand. I think I've got an ADU on my property.
Okay.
a storage unit now. Because because of the rules, and I'm intrigued by what you want to do with your ADU then. What are you?
Well, I don't have an ADU, I have a guest house. It does not have a kitchen.
Oh, okay.
And we specifically built it that way because we would never have long-term renters. We're not interested in being landlords. We just wanted to be proprietors.
Okay. And we have handled guest houses? Okay.
I think so. It was a.
If number 4 on the draft motions is.
Okay, number 4, yeah, it's been marked.
Right. Okay. Yeah, my suggestion was to remove that as a non-allowable. So, any other question? Okay.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Lee, for coming down. Just really quick on the exceptions, are you talking about if somebody, say, has a existing ADU that they're already using, perhaps as an auxiliary short-term rental, to allow them to continue doing that? Is that what you're?
Yes, like for instance, I believe one of the ones that I researched in our area, there's only 4 that are like a guest house ADU that I could identify. One's like a carriage house. That it's called the Chauffeurs something, and I don't know who owns it, but it's above somebody's garage, and I don't know whether they have a kitchen or not, but I mean, it's in the Fairmount neighborhood.
But essentially to allow some type of process for exception if you're already doing it and you might not conform to.
Right, and not just say no. Maybe give them an opportunity to put that somehow, like remove the stove, I don't know, but just give them an opportunity to continue if it's an acceptable dwelling through the inspection process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilor Cook.
I think you just touched on the question that I was going to ask, which it sounds like you've got a detached garage, and we're using terms like the accessory dwelling unit, and I know in the testimony it's come up the transitional or I'm forgetting the word right now, but there's lots of terms. So some of the concerns that I would think is that it still needs to meet the safety requirements, as Acting Director Anderson Ogilvie mentioned. So you're not against the inspection?
No, I've already been inspected and have permits.
Because we were pretty clear about not necessarily grandfathering through, but creating a clean slate. So if people have already been doing it, it's not going to be punitive back through, but we need to be registered. We need to make sure things are up to code. Because something.
Mine's been inspected by the city assessor's office.
Because you can pack people in a lot of places that are not necessarily safe and charge, I'm not saying that you're doing that, but you can charge a lot of money to have people stay in a place that wouldn't necessarily be safe if there was some sort of occurrence, whether it be with electrical or fire.
Yes, that's why the inspection is important. And again, I've been inspected by the city, so I have fire exits, I have all the proper things, and so I think the inspection is important. I'm just saying to give people a pathway instead of saying absolutely no ADUs or absolutely no guest houses, or just to give them a pathway to say, hey, this would be an appropriate.
And you would say that they would still keep operating while they had time to bring things up to, if they were not to pass inspection, or if they were not, it's just for the ADU requirement, the guest house. I guess I'm kind of unclear.
I don't know what your question is, I'm sorry.
I'm kind of unclear what we're grandfathering or what you're wanting to grandfather
I'm just asking
through.
for a pathway for an exception that would.
For specifically ADUs?
Or a guest house or an appropriate dwelling.
Okay.
If I may,
so like I gave the example of the carriage house. I don't know whether that would be where that would fit into that, but to not over restrict, I guess I'm saying, before we kind of preemptively restrict a lot of things before we really know.
Sure.
Okay, Councilor Kaiser.
I was just going to say, if I might, I believe kind of what I had asked before, just providing some type of exception process. So if there are folks already doing this with perhaps an ADU that exists that has say a bathroom and a kitchen, that there would be some type of process to go through so that those would be acceptable and permitted, and they could go to the city and do all those things they need to do to come in within compliance. I believe that's what Leah's referring to, is some type of process like that.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming down. And I tell you, when I read your letter, which was very helpful, I thought, well, that's a good point. How do we deal with the guest house? So thank you for bringing that up. And I want to thank the staff, too, for responding to that in a very appropriate way. And just for everybody else out there who is watching this, it's great to have citizens talk about things because then we can respond to them. So your voice is always heard. We may not always agree or follow up on it, but we like to hear you come down and speak your opinion. So in this case, you spoke it, and it was followed up by the staff in an appropriate way.
Leah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for the written testimony as well. That was quite helpful.
Oh, good. I'm very glad. Thank you for reading it. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Paul McCabe.
My name is Paul McCabe. I live at 1925 Maple Avenue in the Highland neighborhood, right next door to Leah. Okay. So I want to testify as to the experience of living next to a guest house. Her building in the back literally forms the fence between my property and hers in the back. So I have a very intimate relationship with her guest house. I'm a retired school teacher who came up here 6 years ago from LA to find good properties or inexpensive properties that I could afford. I lost my house in the debacle in Southern California and ended up with $7,700 in equity after having paid into it for 15 or 20 years. So I needed to find a place where I could get good property values, and Salem was it. And I stumbled on this house about 5 years ago on 1924 Maple. It's a 1924 cottage. It had good bones. And I bought it for $110,000 and took possession of it March 1st this year. I refinanced the house in November, and it was assessed at $160,000, okay, in 5 years. So I'm very sensitive to property values. Okay, I've worked very hard, put a lot of sweat equity and some blood equity into this house. I had a table saw accident while I was rebuilding. And so I'm very sensitive to it. And this guest house has been a net positive in the values of the property values in our neighborhood. Okay, the experience has been an exceedingly good one. Leah didn't really describe the building all that well, but it was a carriage house, probably built in 1895 when the house was built next door. The house itself had been restored. It's an elegant building. One of the reasons why I was able to buy the house that I have right now, or felt comfortable doing so. And the building looked like it had not been restored since 1890 as well. It was in bad shape. In addition to restoring the house, we're doing gardens. My wife is a very ambitious gardener, and I needed to build a screening fence between my yard and that building so I wouldn't destroy the design of my garden. That's how bad the building was. And so I really feel like having restored that building, now I wouldn't have to build a fence. It's really taken a very dilapidated building and made it into something that's very attractive and very useful. And then quickly, as to the type of people that seem to be showing up at her doorstep, in addition to the young lovers that were this weekend, there have been mostly professional people. And one man I met and talked to had a daughter that was going to Monmouth, and he was staying there with his family to be with her. A young man was here from Boise, Idaho, came up here. He was interviewing at Willamette to become a student there at the law school. And so the people that be coming into the neighborhood are professional. I'm glad to have them there. Believe me, our neighborhood 10 years ago was not having many people that were nice to be there, and there were a lot of love nests on Maple Avenue, but not the kind that raise property values. So anyway, I just want to testify that my experience with the people that come into this and the fact that the property has been improved, that this has been a good experience for me.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Are there any questions? Okay, Darlene Morgan.
My questions and concerns regarding your...
Why don't you come up and just go...
I was going to ask, because they've all been answered, and I wondered if this lady was having my spot.
Oh, sure. Okay, what's your name? Okay. Ah, I see.
Good evening. Nice to see you. It's my first time here, so.
Great.
you know, fair to be nervous, I guess. But anyway, I particularly
If you'd
appreciate...
introduce yourself and...
Oh, I'm sorry. My name
No,
is Sarah Dinsdale. I'm in Ward 8.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate, I went to an early kind of general public meeting about this issue, and starting then have really appreciated the work that staff has done and their clarity in explaining things that are quite complicated. I myself personally don't really want to try and explain the difference between accessory short-term rental thing and a short-term rental thing. So I do hope that some terminology is developed that'll make that easy for people. I have two things that kind of trouble me still. One is what seems to me a very arbitrary limit on the number of days that an owner can be away, and I'm not really sure I understand the rationale for those limits, because there is a process proposed to have a designated manager and clear information to all parties, including on the weekends, for that contact, that supervisory or problem-solving person. I'm really advocating for keeping it simple as possible. The simpler it is, I think the better the compliance will be. And I think that should be part of the goal, is to really encourage people to be part of the process and to comply and make it as transparent as possible. So, and I think even the other issue of limiting the number of people per room starts to feel just a little bit invasive. I mean, are you really wanting to count how many people are in each bedroom? I'm not so sure. Families and rooms come in different sizes. I don't know what the solution is, but simply this 2 people per bedroom strikes me a little odd. So that's my take on that. I know that there's a desire to prevent overcrowding or large unruly groups. Boy, I certainly support that. But I think that there are so many things built into the proposal that there are some safeguards for that. Now, maybe I have not experienced the kind of rental problems or short-term rental problems other people are talking about. I've had terrifically positive experiences. I use Airbnb when I travel throughout states or internationally. Because many times I think it's one of the best things that has occurred in my generation. I meet people, I develop contacts. I could just about now start out on a cross-the-country road trip, stopping to see people I've met through Airbnb. So I think I would really encourage anybody here who hasn't had a chance to experience an example of this sharing culture, home, stay, to give it a try and see, and let's hope you have a good one, but my experiences have been good. Wide range of places to stay and a wide range of people who use them.
Thank you very much. Time's up.
Oh, you bet. I'm gone.
That's
Thanks.
okay. No, there may be questions. Don't run away. I want to understand, because I think you're right, these terms are kind of confusing. Which one are you talking about?
Well, you know what? I unfortunately didn't get here until right when we started, and I've been trying to sort through this information. I'm talking about the resident owner rooms within a house situation. So I know we're not calling it Airbnb, but we're calling it short-term rental, correct?
Yeah.
No,
I believe that's
you guys
correct. Accessory.
You
short-term.
see the difficulty.
Yeah, no, trust me.
All right.
Councilor Lewis.
Well, here's a question you should be able to answer. Of all the places you've stayed, what's the proportion that are the old, not the old, but the traditional bed and breakfast, where the owner is in the house, and have you stayed at any that you were on your own and the owner wasn't there?
I've stayed in one where the owner was barely there, I thought wasn't going to be there, and then turned out to suddenly show up. But this is what you don't know about it. So he said, this was in New York, Brooklyn, and then he said, by the way, I met this really cool guy, and he's going to stay on the futon in the living room tonight. I said, really? I don't know anything about this person. So I took all these precautions. came back and met this person. We talked for hours. Every time we ended up at the same place, we talked for hours. He and his wife and child came out to visit, and I took them up the gorge. We visited. I'm going to head to Toronto to visit them there, and we stay in touch. So it's kind of amazing. You don't really know who you're going to meet, but generally, I've just been absolutely fascinated. Lots of good people.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Lawson, do you want to speak again?
My name is Carol Lawson. I'm the owner of 1811 Chemeketa Street Northeast. I spoke last time. Just a couple of updates that I think are important, and I did provide an email with some information, but I ran into one of the gentlemen who spoke, and I can't remember his name, I'm very sorry, in a restaurant in Salem, because that's what we do here in Salem. We run into people all the time. And we had an opportunity to talk through some of the things that were of great concern to him, and I offered some potential solutions, but they're not the only solutions. And I think the bottom line is, if we can find a way where the neighbors and the neighborhood don't feel intimidated by an owner, which is something that happened in my neighborhood before I came in and opened up ours. There was a unlicensed Airbnb, someone just doing it on the fly, didn't live in town, and caused a lot of angst. And when the neighbors contacted that individual with complaints, that individual was very aggressive. I heard words like abusive. And so I have a lot of compassion for what those neighbors went through and what other neighborhoods might be going through. But I would just encourage that instead of just a simple website, that we also provide a way for there to be some kind of a rating of how those houses are going in the neighborhoods, even when it's not to the level of filing a complaint, but just so that the associations have an opportunity to kind of keep a pulse on what's going on. I have a very open relationship with my neighbors. I hear through our caretaker, I hear personally. Sometimes it's things like they had a baby, they cried all night, and that was a little bit difficult. So, you know, I'm having conversations with people that are coming, and I think if we can find a way to give neighbors a voice without being, as other people have said, so restrictive that we just can't function. I think that balance is what's going to really make this work for Salem. Just quick story, we get people from all over the world. Our family travels in these kinds of places, in these types of rentals all over the world, whether Airbnb or through other services. And my favorite traveler is now coming back for the 4th time. She grew up here in Salem. She lives across the country. Her father is here in an assisted care. She has the opportunity to take her father out of that assisted care and spend a week with him in a home where the yard's gated, where he can feel more like he's at home. And that opportunity would not present itself in a hotel. So.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for coming down, and I read your submission, and I'm going to take a guess here that it was Jeff Schumacher.
Yes.
Okay.
Very tall.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's the president of SCAN, and he came down and testified, and thanks for following up on that. I'm a former president of SCAN, so I know that is a very active neighborhood group, and they have some concerns, and I hope we're addressing them in the changes we've made to the ordinance from the last time. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Joan Weber.
My name is Joan Weber, and I live in Ward 7. I first of all want to thank you for holding another public hearing regarding this proposed revision of the code for short-term rentals. As both my husband and I have stated at previous hearings, we believe that any changes to the code must preserve the livability of our neighborhoods and be in the best interests of all, the individual homeowners and the city. We feel any revision to the code should at least do the following. And I want to preface this by, I'll read these, but in your discussion prior to this meeting, it sounds like you are addressing some of these things, and so I find that very encouraging. We feel that you should prohibit absent property owners from operating STRs in single-family residential zones and require that owners of all adjacent properties to the short-term rentals be notified in writing that the property is operating as such and that the operator will comply with the code, and also require contact information for the owner/manager be supplied to neighbors so they can report concerns and complaints on a 24/7 basis. For me, what became clear from the last public hearing on this matter is that one of the most important issues is compliance. As we all know, there's STRs operating right now that are in violation of the current code, and the city doesn't have enough compliance officers to deal with the issue, let alone to try to enforce proposed changes involving STRs. My husband and I had contact with Brady Rogers in our experience, which I've related numerous times, and last week he spoke about how he took it upon himself to personally address complaints from people such as myself with, properties being operated illegally because he has a limited number of compliance officers, and they're stretched to beyond their workload capacity. So based upon my past experience, I do have a concern regarding compliance. I am encouraged by the individuals who have come up here and have stated they're doing it according to what the code is now, and I applaud that. I respect that. To me, clearly without additional staff to address compliance and licensing for this type of commercial lodging, we risk having no enforcement and no accountability. What would be the incentive to comply with the code? It would essentially mean depending on an honor system, so to speak, and that certainly isn't happening as a whole under the current code today. So basically what it boils down to for me is that I feel that you have an obligation to the homeowners, to the residents, and the city to ensure that compliance will occur and that there will be appropriate staffing.
Great, thank you. I had one question I wanted to ask. You've heard Ms. Lawson twice. She's the lady that owns a house. She's been through the lady who just spoke before you.
Right, and my husband is the gentleman that you spoke to in the restaurant.
Well, I'm just curious. I didn't mean to set up, you guys can visit later. I mean, we'll see each other at the B&B, I don't know. But I'm really curious, how did you respond to that? Because I watched her process. I was the counselor in that ward during her process. So I watched it real closely, and that seems to be pretty much the process that we're looking at, only with more enforcement.
Well,
did that allay any concerns or allay some of your concerns?
It did.
Okay.
And I was very impressed with the fact that here's a person who did the research, knew what she had to do as far as complying with the code, had the respect for her neighborhood and her neighbors to solicit their opinion and to form a good relationship for everybody. I've heard other people stand up here and testify, and it seems like it's been more all about them. Why should I have to inform my neighbors that I'm renting out a bedroom in my home? I'm only doing this for a few more years, and then I'm going to move to Europe and retire. I mean, there was no stated connection, that more personal connection to their neighborhood. And that's what I think my husband and I are hoping to see in this whole process. I mean, we're not fearful people of, you know, persons coming from anywhere and staying in someone's home. But I think it is prudent to have some type of control as far as maintaining that connection with the neighborhood.
And you had none of that when that house went in near you?
Well, no, because there were 11-plus people staying there.
But there was no conditional use, no public hearings?
No, and this gentleman never even told anyone in the neighborhood that he was doing it. It just sort of, we discovered it by accident, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kaser?
Thank you. Thanks, Joan, for coming down again. I just want to understand so that I'm completely clear about what you're saying. You had an issue, you called Compliance Services in Brady, and it was resolved, correct?
Yes, it was eventually. I mean,
okay, because I think that's important to note. It's not an ongoing, it's still out there happening and nothing's been done.
No.
So, I mean, you were able to register complaints and work with our compliance services in order to resolve the issue.
Right.
Even at their current staffing capacity and everything.
Well, right, but my understanding is that Brady kind of had to take it upon himself to do it. And, I mean, my husband and I were very grateful and very appreciative of how he handled the whole situation.
But just to make clear that the issue was ultimately resolved.
Yes,
Thank you.
was.
And there was a newspaper article about it, too,
Oh,
wasn't
yeah, there was a picture of the house on
yeah, the whole
the front
shebang.
page of
That
the
was quite a
newspaper,
show.
too, so.
Any other, yes, Councilor McCoy?
Yeah, following along with what Councilor Kaser said, you know, that would have been, even now, if we passed what we passed here, that guy would be in breaking the rules for short-term rental, if what we want to call it now. He was just breaking the rules, period.
Yeah.
And so where I'm having a trouble and struggling with what we want to do here moving forward is, he was breaking the rules anyway. We fixed it and moved on. And because this guy broke the rules that really don't apply to the Airbnb model per se, in the fact whether it's, you know, with a small 1 or 2 rooms in a house, or whether, you know, the owner has to be there and live in it, whether we say 270 or 300 days or whatever. None of those rules would have applied to this person that's got you saying we've got to sort of regulate everybody else. So what's your response to that? Because he broke the existing statute or ordinance, and we took care of it. And now, because of that, you're asking us to regulate a whole different part of the equation.
Well, but it wasn't different because this gentleman was, you know, Airbnb is a situation where you can rent an entire apartment, an entire home, or it can just be a room in a home. Like, you know, some folks are saying that sometimes the owner is there. So he was advertising on Airbnb as renting the entire place, a 5-bedroom home. He was on VRBO. He was on various other websites advertising. And there was no one there. He had a manager, I believe, but we never saw her. And so I guess my concern is just that in light of the fact that a lot of this is going on under the radar, so to speak, there's a lot of people here in the city doing this without paying the occupancy tax, without,
I agree with all that.
you know, that type of thing. You know, I think it's only right that, you know, if you establish how this is going to be done, and then people should follow what is set up. That's and I think, you know, to totally change the rules for single-family residential neighborhoods, I think you have to be careful. I mean.
Okay, my point is, the existing rules and what's going to exist now with a short-term rental, if they wanted to do what was being done in that, and they would have to apply for a conditional use permit.
Right.
There'd be a hearing to do what he wanted to do, that person or any owner wanted to do, and they'd either get it or they wouldn't. And if they didn't get it, it'd be prohibited, and you could stop it that way.
Right.
That's still different than what we're talking about, the accessory short-term rental, which is the owner's got to be there most of the year living there, and they can rent it out for specific periods of time. It's sort of 2 different issues, and I'm not sure we're solving your issue as it occurred, and as your biggest concern is, by regulating this thing too much. That's where my struggle is.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
well, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. Does anyone else want to speak to this issue? Yes, sir.
My name was on the list, Eric Miller.
Oh, gosh, I apologize, Mr. Miller. I got all confused when Darlene Morgan decided not to talk.
What's your flavor on Darlene?
It's Darlene's
That's good. I'm Eric Miller, Ward 7, and I apologize for not having written testimony, but you wouldn't want my written testimony after I heard the 30-minute work session earlier today because it would have changed dramatically. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm still against short-term rentals. When I bought my house, I never wanted to live next to a motel. I wanted to have my private peace and enjoyment of a residential property. And I still feel that if you wanted to get in the residential, in the short-term rental business, there's a lot of property around town that you could participate with that, create those wonderful experiences for people, and so on. That being said, I do appreciate the changes that were provided in your staff report. I appreciate the notification requirement, as well as the contact information, both of which will help prevent problems in the future. So I think that will be a preventative, proactive step. First, I have a couple issues to clarify. You may or may not want to answer them or not, I don't know. But first, is there a limit? There's a limit to 10 people in a house, but I didn't hear about the limit to the number of people in each bedroom. Maybe, I know in one case there was 2, but was that in all of the accessory, non-accessory, short-term rentals? So just a clarifying point on that one. And then the scan representative wanted a definition of guest room, and I'm not sure that that was provided. Maybe it was, but I thought that was a valid point. Are we going to take a closet, convert it into a bedroom, and call that a wonderful facility? As for that, I have some more concerns. I don't like the self-certification for the first year. I appreciate providing the rules and letting the owners know. I'm sure it would be very difficult to go through and find all the requirements that you have to have, whether it be fire, handicap accessibility, all those things. Having them in one place, I think, is very helpful for the owners to help them comply with things. But I do think that they should be inspected before they're used. What if there's some gross safety and health violations? I just remodeled my house, and there were some headers that were dramatically, had some significant problems, and they could have fallen down and hurt somebody. Regardless of how you feel about self-certification, I feel that the fees associated with these rentals are too low to pay for the work that's needed to run the program effectively. I'm reminded of Brady Rogers, the enforcement director, volunteering his time to come out on a weekend to help resolve concerns involving an irresponsible landlord. I don't want people to have to volunteer their time because they have been given an inadequate budget. That's just not acceptable. Number 5, or next one. I'm dumbfounded to learn that motels are inspected annually and pay for this service, while owners of short-term rentals would not be inspected as frequently nor pay for the service. I don't get why short-term rentals should be treated any differently. I still think there's some other good ideas, like requiring all units to have an owner or agent be on the premise all the time. You can discuss about days, but all the time. Limiting the short-term rental property to rent to 1 or 2.
Mr. Miller, thank you very much. Your definition of a guest room comment remind me of that Bob Hope joke, the rooms were so small the rats were stooped. It's,
could happen.
It does, apparently. Yeah, I've stayed in that. Okay, any questions for Mr. Miller? Do you guys want to hear from Brady? He's coming up a lot. Okay, is there anyone else that wants to speak on this issue? Darlene, do you? Excellent.
My name is Darlene Morgan, and we live in South Salem off of Reese Hill Road. And 2 years ago, my husband and I purchased a triplex, and we live in one of the units. It has 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. And we are 2 people. We didn't need that, and we thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to participate in Airbnb, which we had experience with. Our daughter has been an Airbnb host for a number of years and really enjoyed it. And I would say that 85% of the time, maybe even a higher percentage, the experience will be good. There is just always the opportunity for an unpleasant experience. But the majority of the time, it is a positive experience. And I agree with the gentleman on the end. Is that Mr.? Yes, that's what I thought. That one bad experience shouldn't determine strict regulations that hinder the opportunity of the majority of people that will not violate the rules or the regulations or compliance, because the majority of people that are Airbnb hosts, they have their homes set up and they create an environment that encourages people to have good behavior or handle things the right way. And if you don't like what's going on in your home, you can speak to the guests. We've not ever had that happen, and we've had 90-some guests in our home. We've never had a bad experience. And my daughter and I just got back from Europe, and we stayed in 8 different homes. And 2 of those were individual apartments where we did not see the people that we rented from, but it was a very good experience. Everyone else, the owners were in the home with us, and we loved it because it's like a community. You become a part of the world, not just a part of your state or it's promoting unity among the world, members of the world.
Thank you, Darlene, very much. Councilor Lewis.
Okay, your situation sounds a little unique. You have a triplex, which means that you don't necessarily get up in the morning and cook breakfast for your guests. They have their own little place?
No, it's within our home.
Common, okay.
Our apartment is one of the 3 in the triplex.
Okay.
And we do provide breakfast.
Okay.
That's up to the host, whether they provide a breakfast or not. We do.
I was taken by the number. You said you've had 90 guests. Can you explain generally why people come to Salem and want to stay at a place like yours?
Well, it's already been mentioned, the guests that Lee, I think, mentioned having, or maybe Sarah, that we have had young people attending Willamette University, and we've had people who were visiting their children that were attending one of the local universities. We've had people coming, staying with us that were looking for a place to live, and they stayed with us maybe a week, maybe 2, while they found a suitable place to live. We've had traveling medical professionals stay with us. We had our first guest was a traveling nurse. Our second guest was a medical student from the University of Washington who was traveling from California back to Seattle with her parents that had met her in California. We have people coming to the area to visit family, and their family doesn't have room for them, and they've chosen to stay with us. And I don't know, just a wide, sometimes just people traveling through, and we had someone come down from Seattle. He and his girlfriend were coming to the Willamette winery, and it was part of his work. He works for a club in Seattle. So-
And one last question, if I could. Of the 90, what percentage would you say write a review?
I believe that all but 2. Because it's important that you as a guest can look at what people think about the host, and then the host writes a review about the guest. And you can't see each other's reviews until you've both done a review. So there's no opportunity to
Negotiate.
Right, or say something that you don't want out there.
There'd be a better breakfast involved there, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
You should go on the website and check out the places in this area and visit. We would like that.
Okay, thank you very much. You want to speak?
Yes, you do. Good evening. I am speaking
Your name,
on
please.
I'm sorry. My name is Tanya Bailey, and I live in the historic Highland neighborhood. I'm here on behalf of Leah and Robert, who have a bed and breakfast just several streets up from myself. And I come without a whole lot of experience, and I didn't get to hear some of the opening remarks. But I want to give my experience as a neighbor of someone who has an Airbnb, and I've found it to be enhancing to our neighborhood. We have a very active neighborhood full of young families in the few blocks where I live, and we bring in a lot of art, and we bring in a lot of culture and music and events. And bringing in people from outside of Salem who are wanting to press in an authentic way to what we have to offer here as a community, I think is vital and important. I think it's an unfair comparison to talk about an Airbnb, and some of what you just spoke to I really resonated with. But to compare that to a motel or a hotel, I think the demographic of people who choose to stay at an Airbnb are people who are wanting to experience life as we live it here in Salem, who are wanting to be less a tourist and more a participant. In particular in our neighborhood, where we are really working hard to create a community that's very local. We have an active restaurant community on Broadway now that draws people a little bit more. We have the bike route through our neighborhood. So that's really all I want to say in support of what has already been spoken. And then also as someone who travels, and I've been to many Airbnbs here and overseas as well, and I can attest to that community that is built. And I love the idea of holding hands across countries and across state lines with other people who are coming in and getting to experience a little bit of who we are here in Salem.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions? Good, thank you for coming down. Okay. I'm going to close public hearing. I'm not closing it. Go ahead. You want to talk to somebody?
Yeah, I want to.
Do you? Okay, Lisa, do you want Lisa?
Oh, Lisa or Brady, I'll take either. Maybe both, it depends. One of my questions is, do we have any policy for boarding house and definition, and if we have any codes or restrictions with boarding houses?
We have, we allow room and boards, which I think is a boarding house, so you rent a room within a house as your permanent lodging, and they're allowed in most zones. Some single-family zones, there's a restriction, I think 5 rooms total, conditional use required, and then you can do it in commercial zones.
So that would fall into the accessory short-term?
No, it's already a use that's allowed in the code today.
Okay.
Because it's for long-term lodging, so you rent month to month, but you're just renting a room, and you share the kitchen requirement. The kitchen is shared.
Okay.
And they're inspected. They're licensed and inspected yearly.
And then the question for Brady, the 19,000 rental properties, or not rental, 19,000
Multifamily
units that
units.
have to be inspected by one inspector. What would a usable load be like for a code compliance officer? Would it be 500? Would it be 10,000? I mean, what is the standard range for units?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. My name is Brady Rogers. I am your Neighborhood Enhancement Division
administrator. 19,000 dwelling units is the approximate now in the program. It becomes very difficult for a single officer to do those inspections when they hit about 13, 14,000, and then once you're at 15 or 16,000, you're just hanging on.
So I really tried to push hard on the budget committee, and I'll try in a different way that I can. If we were to have one additional code compliance officer, it wouldn't be a drop in the bucket. It would make it very manageable. The concerns that people from my ward talked about not being able to inspect or enforce, would be abated by adding the second code compliance position. Is that correct?
Second code compliance officer would be able to easily take care of the portfolio now and anything that gets added by this ordinance.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy?
I want to go back to something we have not discussed tonight, but we did discuss last time, and that's the transient occupancy tax. And just to confirm that we're still, the current rendition is still on the honor system of collecting. And I want to hear the thought behind that. And can you confirm that it's still going to be that way, and what your thoughts are?
I'm not sure what you mean by honor system. So it's required now of somebody doing lodging.
Right.
It would be required of these folks doing short-term lodging. And because we would have a license requirement, we would actually know who those people are. So then we could ensure we could collect the tax from them. They would have to register to pay the tax as part of getting their license.
But I was under the impression that a lot of cities have had the, say, Airbnb or other provider actually collect the tax on their behalf and pay it to the city.
So Airbnb does that in some cities. They do agreements with the cities to collect the tax and then remit it to the city. We don't currently have that type of agreement with them, so it would be on the operator. They would be required to submit the tax to us.
Do you anticipate entering into one of those agreements?
Well, we have finance staff here, so perhaps they should answer that question. I don't want to speak for them. They want to come up, perhaps?
I suppose I can take a first shot at that and then have someone clarify if needed. What we would anticipate is bringing back some revisions to Chapter 37, which I believe deals with the collection mechanism. I believe our preference at this point would be to define these companies in a certain manner under the code, such as intermediaries like in Orbitz, and they could submit or remit to us the taxes collected. That would also help with somewhat of you speaking to an honor system, an auditing where we could also collect the information from the owner or operator of the facility and what we get from the intermediaries such as Airbnb to compare what's been remitted to the city.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Following up a bit on Councillor Hoy's, and I was thinking of this with when the folks were testifying. I mean, this is pretty much driven on a complaint system as opposed to having somebody really out there monitoring things. Would that be correct?
That is the way the zoning code is enforced today, yes.
Okay.
All aspects.
So, following up on what Councillor Hoy said, or his questions, you could have the situation where somebody who pays the license would nevertheless cook the books and show they only had 8, I could see Mr. Rogers is nodding his head, where they could say we only had 8 rentals this last reporting period when they really had 28 or 38 or 48, and you're not really going to know that. I mean, in that sense, this ordinance, as many ordinances, is sort of aspirational until somebody aspires to make a complaint.
Correct.
Okay.
Councillor McCoy.
A response to a comment on what Councilor Anderson just said. You know, I learned long ago, lobbying and representing business interests with the state. Long ago, one of the folks I worked with, one of the regulators said, "You know, Steve, regulations aren't for the 95 or 96 or 97 or 98% of the people that do it right all the time. They're for the 2% that are making end runs and not doing it and disobeying the rules and taking advantage of it." And that's pretty much, doesn't matter what we do, that's sort of a fact. I'm interested, Lisa, or Bryce, we keep hearing Airbnb, and we've got VRBO and FlipKey or whatever it's called. We've got a number of other entities. Have they surfaced, and have you discussed things with them? Because it's, easy to target probably the biggest player in that market, but that's not the only player in that market. And it strikes me, we can get an agreement for Airbnb to start collecting for us and have 4 other entities that they can just flip to real quick. And we're still back in the same position that you're concerned with, trying to collect that tax and license them to
So
require them to do it.
again, the current rules require the operator to remit the tax, and then if the city creates agreements with Airbnb or other operators in the future, that would get the operator out of having to do that themselves. So
But have you talked to any of those other folks? Have they even?
No, the main provider in the city right now is Airbnb. So we have reached out in terms of discussing agreements with FlipKey or VBRO, but as a yeah.
Councilor Lewis, I'm sorry.
I want to poke a little bit more about the tot fee. I, again, have utilized a vacation rental by owner more than Airbnb, but I've used both. I've never run into the situation where I've had to write 2 checks, one to the provider, Airbnb, and one to the property owner for the taxes. It's always been collected by the resource. And so I would strongly encourage that if we're going to allow these things, that we work with the folks that do the bookings. If for no other reason, the owner collects the tax, increases the likelihood that the city doesn't see it. The provider, like Airbnb, collect the tax, you're going to see it each time because it's of record. And one other thing I wanted to mention too, and I think this goes towards compliance. If I were to Google Salem, Oregon, short-term rental, Salem, Oregon, I would get the hits from Airbnb and vacation rental by owner. I would think in a short amount of time I could get the list of properties that are using those sources. So that would give you the list of folks that are using them. Now, whether they're on your list of licensees or not, that would be easy to determine. So we're not talking about a great deal of time running up and down the street looking for signs. We're talking about a little bit of time checking those sites out, right?
And it also depends, if it becomes easier, how many more people are doing it, and people are more aware of it. The number could increase, and it could be harder to track it down. But yeah, generally you can research the sites, kind of narrow it down to locations.
Well, they don't provide the address unless you are registered, but you can, if you know Salem well enough, can kind of tell the area where the house is, but it would take a little bit of sleuthing. They do have pictures, so you can try to match it up on Street View.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Yes, Councilor Nate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the work session, we had that Lisa had made a comment on renting rooms.
Yes.
For extended periods of time.
Yes.
And can you repeat what that was? Because we just talked a little bit about the month-to-month thing as a boarding house, but if I live in a house and want to rent 2 rooms out on an extended basis, do I have to do anything?
No. So it's permitted in the single-family zone to rent, to have 2 boarders. I think we call it taking boarders. Is that what we call it?
Taking of boarders or
Taking
leasing
of
of
boarders
rooms.
or leasing of rooms. In the zoning code, you don't need extra parking, you don't need a license, you don't need to notify anybody. It's just 2 extra people can live there and pay rent month to month, 30 days or more, in addition to the resident family.
So
That's
it's
permitted in
2
the zoning
extra people, not 2 extra bedrooms?
No, yes, two additional people in the house.
Okay.
However.
Which could be 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms then?
Correct.
Okay.
But that's for a long-term basis, not short-term.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, then define long-term. You just said 30 days or more.
That's more than 30
Yeah,
days.
30
Yes.
days is the cutoff between long and short term.
It's like a month-to-month rental.
So if somebody said, okay, we're renting for, it's 30 days or nothing for us, they're okay?
Mm-hmm.
As long as they're there?
Yep.
They have to be there, though, right? They have to live there?
It's not a short-term rental, it's not a commercial.
No, I'm just
renting. You're renting it for someone and they live at your house.
They live at your house.
They live there,
Yeah,
yes.
the owner's got to be present.
No.
No.
Yeah,
They just live there. I mean, it's, they live there, yes.
There's a
The
resident-
owners
there's a
live
re-
there.
There's
Yes.
a resident family that is there,
Yes.
that is taking on the boarders and leasing out the rooms in their home, but it's for a long-term basis. So it could be a month-to-month, lease. But if people are coming in, just for a couple weeks, that is not, the same taking of boarders, leasing of rooms. That's it.
But you can have a rental house as well. It's not.
Correct.
Thank you. Just so we all understand that, I think that's just like you have a mortgage and you're having trouble paying your mortgage and you've got extra rooms and you lease out those rooms to help you make the mortgage. That's really the situation that happens in that long term.
Correct.
Okay. Then I do have just a point of order question about some of these suggested motions. These are all in addition to moving to adopt the ordinance as presented.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be adjustments to that. Councilor Cook.
Question to the city manager, city attorney. I know the extra funding was not put through with the budget. What are the options for securing funding for the enforcement piece of this through code at this point in council?
The funding wouldn't be through code. Options for council would be, the budget is still going to city council, and city council can change the budget committee recommendation. The limits are broad enough where adding revenue for an additional enforcement officer could be, or would be within city council's discretion.
Thank you.
Councilor McCoy, do you want to make a motion?
Off this page, or you want me to move the staff recommendation?
The staff recommendation.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second by Hoy. Okay. Let's have a discussion now.
Okay.
The motion. McCoy.
Well, I don't know if this... Mr.
Well, if you want me to
McCoy
have a
wants-
discussion, I mean, I think that there's impetus here to amend the staff recommendation.
Well,
If you
I'll
want
do
me to
that.
start doing that, I move
No,
that.
I'd like you to, you want to just say anything about it. You don't have to, Anderson.
Well, yeah, Anderson always has, no, I am ready to pounce on one. I move to direct staff to engross ordinance bill number 517 to remove the restriction prohibiting accessory short-term rentals from being operated within guest houses, provided the total number of guest rooms on a property does not exceed the maximum allowed for accessory short-term rentals generally.
Okay, which one's that?
Number 4.
Second.
4. Okay, so would you like, let's go ahead and discuss that one.
Well, we heard testimony.
Yep.
Oh, there you are. There you are. I knew you were still here, Leah. But that was compelling to me, and I think something that was sort of got lost in the process, that I think it's totally appropriate for a guest house to be allowed to operate, as she indicated, in this process. So I think it was point well made, and I support her recommendation.
On this amendment, we'll vote on this amendment, then we'll move to the next, okay? Yes.
Just a point of discussion with the accessory dwelling units, the granny flats, the tiny houses, the guest house, and also the short-term rentals, how all of these kind of descriptions are very specific, but they've been kind of used interchangeably. I think the concern that we want to be mindful of is if someone is building an accessory dwelling unit on their property and then operating that as a short-term rental, how that would affect livability within the neighborhood. I think the planning group has done a great job to make sure that the code in place would help keep livability in that neighborhood for people wanting to use their property in a way that they would want to have the freedom to be able to use it. But just to be mindful of that, because we're going to be, you said the ADUs are coming before us pretty soon. So, I mean, you know, I want to put 5 ADUs on my property, and I'm going to rent them all out with different companies. And then now I've got 300 people staying in my lot with 10 cars. And this kind of fear that we would be looking at, it looks like you've got a good framework to prevent that from happening. So thank you.
Councilor.
So just point of order too, we're in deliberations, correct?
Right.
Right, so we can't ask staff more questions.
You can.
We can, okay, in this way. I just wanted to speak to Councilor Cook's order. The way that this is being amended is ADUs are not, you cannot use an ADU as a short-term rental or as an accessory short-term rental. And an ADU means it has a kitchen and a bathroom. Right. And a guest house has a kitchen or a bathroom, but not both. So
I understand, but when we heard our testimony, people were using different terms.
Right. So the terms we should be focusing on are
guest house,
ADU, and guest house.
Got you. I'm with you, Councilor Kaiser.
All right. I just yeah.
That's clear. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the amendment's adopted. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I move to direct staff to engross ordinance bill number 5-17 to reduce the total number of days an accessory short-term rental may be rented within a calendar year without the resident family present as host from 95 days to 45 days.
Second.
And
second by Ossick. Okay.
And if I may speak to that, at the last meeting, I was prepared to make it 60 days as opposed to the 95. But listening to the testimony tonight, you get it from both sides. One, we get the people who say I'll just say Airbnb, but the people who do these kind of rentals, they do it because they're the sharing economy and they want to meet people and they want to do all this stuff. Well, if that's what you want to do and you're not there, that's not happening. Then the other side of that is the neighborhoods say, we're concerned that people aren't going to be there, who knows what's going to happen. So I'm sure the neighborhood would probably want us to say they've got to be there every day. But in the middle of that is people take vacations, and I think we have to be cognizant of that. Oh, I would guess that most people who take vacations are not going to want to go away and leave their house rented in the Airbnb type situation. And then I was also struck by the fact that the people that are renting the average rental for Airbnb, or average number of nights, is 66. So. You know, that helps me think that we ought to go to a shorter time, which is why I picked 45 days. And I will say that if somebody else says 60 days, I'm not going to vote against that, but I think 45 days is a good compromise.
So I listened to the testimony, and I came to a different conclusion. I came away thinking, why would we reduce it from 90? And so I actually became more comfortable leaving at 90 than I was before. So I was surprised when I heard you say 45, and so I feel like throughout this whole process, my goal has been to make sure that to enact an ordinance, but to make sure we had sufficient guardrails to maintain the livability in our neighborhoods, but to allow this to happen, because I think it's a good thing, but to keep those guardrails up. And to me, 90 days seems like a sufficient number. I could live with 60. 45 seems just too restrictive in my mind.
Okay, Councilor Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and similarly, Councilor McCoy and I were talking about that. There's people who, go down south when it rains here for a couple of months, and, then they may at some other point in the summer go visit one of their other extended family people for a month or whatever. So there could be 3 months where they're out, and if it's working for Portland in all of their neighborhoods, it didn't sound like they were having a lot of difficulties with it. I don't see why we would necessarily want to restrict that beyond something that is working for a neighboring community. And so
what I would suggest then is both you and Councilor Hoy have argued against Councilor
Correct.
Anderson's motion. Okay. Councilor Lewis.
Well, spread it out a little bit more. I can't vote for the motion. I came up with 180 days as what I could live with. And here's why. As Councilor McCoy mentioned, there are people who, their home is Salem, Oregon, but because of their age or their health, they need to go somewhere else during the winter months. And 6 months, I mean, our winters are, well, this one was about 9.5 months. That still leaves them occupying their home half the year. And I don't share the concern about new people coming and staying at my house under certain circumstances. And all of these organizations, Airbnb, Vacation Rental by Owner, they're very strict about what they do. They protect the neighborhood as much as anybody. And so I would, I could live with the original 95 days, but not going under that.
Councilor Cook.
Just to build on Councilor Lewis's comment, I have a hard time believing that we couldn't do something for the summer, and the summer being a standard 3 months. I just find it, I'm not sure if that would be enough to protect. If the idea is that we need to make sure the owner has presence, that they're committed to the neighborhood. We heard today about that commitment to neighbors and the people that have invested in that property. I think that we would need to look at other motions tonight outside of the time length.
Councilor McCoy.
I think originally I was leaning towards shortening the time, but the more I've thought about this and gotten more comfortable with it, I think the 95 is fine. I'm not sure I want to go to 180, though I understand why you do that. Yeah, those guys do go down in October and come back in May, so all those snowbirds. But, I started looking again at some of the stats we've got here. The average guest group size is 1.8 people. 98% of the trips involve less than 4 people. 2/3 of the rentals are the folks where the owner's at home and it's 1 or 2 rooms and they're renting. So 1/3 are there for a larger group, but when you look at the numbers, they're just not to the scope of what was causing the big problem here, where it was 15 people and parking all over and partying and, just really disturbing the neighborhood. 4 people is not going to do that. The average is 2, and 66 nights per year is a typical listing. All that indicates that there's not a whole heck of a lot of 30-day and 20-day. It might be 3 or 4 days, and that to me is not going to be disruptive to the neighborhood. So I don't think I've talked myself into voting no on this amendment.
Let me help you here just for a second. I think, remember, this is a calendar year, so you've got 3 months before January, 3 months after January, so you're really talking, if you do 90 is 180, 45 is 90.
That'd be the first year they could do that.
Yeah.
After that, they could, but you're right.
Yeah. So your first time's the charm. You find out how it goes, huh?
What?
Okay, I think everybody's ready to vote.
I just want to say one thing. I think that the situation's posited where the snowbirds go, where they're gone for a long time and they want to rent their house. That does, in the general scope of things, if I understand what the staff says, if I'm going to Mexico for 3 months, I rent my house out to somebody else for 3 months, and then that doesn't even come under the provisions of this statute. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so if you're more than 30 days, the statute doesn't even apply.
Yeah.
But if you put it on Airbnb, even if it's for 1 day, it would apply.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Okay, all those in favor of Councilor Anderson's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion fails. Councilor Anderson.
I'd like to propose a motion that has a chance of passing, so I'll try it. I'll take another chance at this.
Never say die.
No. I move to direct staff to engross ordinance bill number 5-17 to require notice of approval of any license or renewal for both short-term rentals and accessory short-term rentals to be provided to the neighborhood association and property owners located within 250 feet of the subject property. The notice shall include the local representative contact information and a link to the city website where the contact information is available.
Second.
Second by Cook. So,
I can speak to this again. This again was an issue that the neighborhood groups brought up, that we need to know about it. We need to have some way to do it, and the city staff came up with some great ideas of the website. You know, and a notice to both the neighborhood association and the neighbors, and I think that covers the concerns of the neighborhood association.
Councilor Lewis.
Well, I am going to say it's a better motion than the one that when we first started this conversation, we were going to put signs in the yards or a big sign in the window or maybe a red X on the door, I don't know. But I can't get past the privacy issue for me. It's my house. It's not my neighbor's house. If something's going on in that house, they certainly have the right to do something about it. But to assume that something's going to be going on in that house because I'm not there is not appropriate. And so I can't vote for it.
Councilor Cook.
Just to build on that, point well taken on both accounts, but I appreciate the wording in this motion that to require notice of approval of license or renewal for both. So this means they've already gone through the process with staff. Staff has already approved it. It's moving forward. And I would say, yes, there's a privacy issue, but this is vital because of outside of posting the notice on the door, if there is an issue like what came up in my ward, which was egregious and, as Councillor McCoy had mentioned, was already against the rules, not someone playing by the rules, people will not know who to contact. There is a privacy issue, but what's written here doesn't necessarily mean that the owner's private information would be out there. It could be something as simple as short-term accessory dwelling unit rental has been approved within 250 feet, contact the city for further information. And they could be told, here's who you contact if you have a problem. I think especially because we don't have enough code compliance officers right now to go through this, we need to have neighborhood buy-in. Neighborhoods will be the feet on the ground, the first responders in these situations to be able to tell us what's working and what's not, and it's vital that we keep them in the loop.
Councilor Boyd.
So I mentioned a couple of times that my goal was to make sure that we have sufficient guardrails up if we pass this, and I'm pleased to be able to support this one because I think this gives us the kind of guardrail that we need. It gives the neighbors the opportunity to have some recourse if there's a problem, and people can avoid, if they have a significant privacy concern, they can avoid it by not participating in this program. So I think they have options. So I very much support this one.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a problem with the accessory short-term rental piece of this.
Yeah.
I think the other, they'd be notified anyway, especially if it was in a residential district, because it'd be a conditional use. But again, if I have one bedroom and I could have somebody stay in it 5 times a year, why does the neighborhood association need to know about that? So
I think the question I have on this too, I mean, I don't have a huge problem with it, but if you give people a chance to comment, they think it means anything, and it doesn't. It's just, you say, well, we're notifying you. There's no comment. There's nothing. It's just you're notified. On the other one, you've got a full conditional use program in place. Right. You've got public hearings and all that. I'm just not sure why we're doing it. I'm just not clear why, if I'm renting a bedroom out, my next door neighbor needs to know, or I need to know what he's doing. I'm just not clear on it.
Because if you're neighborly, your neighbor already knows.
I'm just not sure what I'm being notified of. Tom, what am I being notified of?
Well, I first think that if we are going to codify this situation by saying we're going to have rules and regulations, then somebody is opting into that, which is a different situation than just sort of a free-form thing. So that would be my first concern. Second answer is, again, this was something that was expressed by many of the people who testified from the neighborhood groups and also by other counselors have indicated. I understand your issue, Mayor, but I think this is the fact that they have notice, will they say something about it or will they not? I just think it's helpful in the situations where we're going to end up with some problems that we've seen discussed.
Well, are we creating, I guess that's my question,
Yeah.
Are we creating a problem with notice with no end? There's no place to go with it.
I'll let Councilor Hoy answer that one. He looks like he's eager.
So I don't know if I'm going to answer it specifically, but we have, I mean, our neighborhood associations play a vital role in the livability of the city, and by just putting them on notice, helping them know where these properties are in their neighborhoods, they can help, I think, avoid some of these issues as they come, if there are problems. We're only talking about it if there's an actual problem with that particular property. Chances are 99.9% of these are never going to come onto the radar because they're going to be run really well. This is only when there's a problem, and so it's to help address those when those come up. And I think that we have asked our neighborhood associations to sort of play that role on an informal level, and I think this just gives them the information so they can do that.
If I may.
I think it's really important that we include, especially our neighborhood associations in this, for the accessory short-term rental. What a property owner would be doing is considered a special use. So it's not just outright allowed. It's not typical. You know, it's not a single family dwelling where just a family lives there and they live there forever or permanently. It's a special use. It's different. It's unexpected. So for my neighborhood, if I had somebody next to me and it was an accessory short-term rental and I saw people going and coming, I would be like, what's going on? You know, are they doing something mischievous, or they have an Airbnb? I don't know. So I think there is a distinguishing circumstance there for a special use, and I don't think this is overly prohibitive towards that. The short-term rentals, you're right in that they're already doing this through a conditional use. My question to staff was, that is for single-family zoning. Would this approval, notice of approval, also apply for other zoning also? And do we do that for, like, bed and breakfast, for instance, now?
We don't now because they're not required to be licensed, so our idea is that all short-term and accessory short-term would get a license and we would send notice. And really the main purpose is that would be a way to let the neighbors know who the local contact is, and then also the website where that information will be kept up to date.
Let me just try this out on you. I know neighborhoods, probably my own too, where there's a number of rentals, and there's a lot that goes on around being in a neighborhood that has rentals. And there are neighbors would like to know who owns the building. Who do I contact if I don't like my new neighbor? Because this is my full-time neighbor. Why don't we do, I worry that you carry this kind of intrusion, you will carry it further into, well, all rentals ought to be noticed to the next door neighbor and this neighborhood organization. Some are good, some aren't quite as good in terms of their involvement. So I'm not sure this mystification of them may be a little misplaced.
I think it's different though when you have somebody who's renting long-term, because they're living there. Yeah. I mean, they're moving all their stuff and they're committing to living there however long. But most people are living there for more than a month, typically. So I would actually like to amend the motion to just require notice of approval of any license or renewal for both short-term rentals and accessory short-term rentals to be provided to the neighborhood association only. And that notice shall include local representative contact info, et cetera, et cetera.
I'll second that.
And just to speak on your point, the information about who owns the property is public knowledge. Anybody can do a property search to find out who owns the property.
Well, then why are we doing this notice?
Because even if we know who...
You see that your argument carries itself around.
Those county records, I don't.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I think the issue between all rentals and this rental is an issue that was discussed here and also discussed in my earlier motion. All rentals, these only apply to 30 days or less. So that's the distinction to me between rentals of apartments or homes or anything else, because those, I think by statute, if there's no time period, it's a 30-day, month-to-month rental, so they're already out of that issue, and most of the time, by rental agreement, by lease agreement, it's going to be longer than that. I will also say that in a sidebar conversation that Councilor Kaiser and I had, when she discussed this, I said, make the amendment. So I'm supportive of this amendment. I think that takes care of the concerns that I think the neighborhood groups have, and I also think it takes care of the concerns expressed that this is too much, I'll just shorthand it, the privacy concerns that have been mentioned here. Not that I agree with the privacy concerns, but we're taking care of the people who do agree with them.
And this is something to notice of approval. It's already been approved. And we do have already code and legislation in place to protect livability of neighborhoods in other areas, like the number of garage sales you can have per year, like the number of signs you can have in your yard, we live in the city because we care about how we treat our neighbors, and because we live here, we need to treat our neighbors respectfully, and we put that into code in various forms. So I don't think it's that unusual. I mean, if you just want to have your car up on cinder blocks and do whatever you want with your house, there's lots of other places that you can live. I agree we shouldn't be intrusive, and people should have the right to do what they want to with their property. However, we live in close quarters in the city, and what you do on your property can be obtrusive to neighbors.
Okay, Councilor Kaiser's motion. Amendment.
If I may?
Yes.
Because it is a neighborhood association and they're fairly sophisticated, rather than actually including the name of the local representative, if it was available on the website anyway, then you don't have pieces of paper with other people's names out there. That would be...
The notice doesn't have to be on paper. It could just be an electronic notice.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, so we have
You
now
took out that line, I could have went with it.
You just want to amend the amendment? Okay, let's vote on the amendment. All those in...
No.
We amended the original motion.
We're not ready for the motion yet.
No, that's right.
Okay, I see. We amended the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So we'll vote on the amendment. Is that what you want? Motion is amended?
The motion as amended.
The original...
Your motion. No, your motion.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Jeez.
So number 5, but, or I'm sorry,
Taking
number
out the
4,
250? Oh, we're on number 4?
Number 5
Without 250. You got it.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, are there any further amendments to the original motion?
There should be 3 left.
No, 2 is only if 1 passed.
Isn't 6?
Oh,
6 we didn't go.
right. We had the top one.
I'll go ahead. I move to direct staff to engross ordinance bill number 5-17 to only require inspections for short-term rentals.
Second.
Did you second it?
Yep.
Okay. Now, which one is that?
6.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I think it's important that we have some type of inspection for the accessory short-term rental, even if it's, I think what's proposed right now is once every 5 years. And I'm just thinking back to the case of I'm going to pick on you, Leah, sorry, because I know your case. She has a guest house that she went through a permitting process to bring up to code, and it's licensed and everything. And I think it's important from a safety standpoint that the gentleman up here testifying that people aren't renting out spaces that are unsafe. And I don't think it's an overly burdensome regulation every 5 years to have that inspection, because this would essentially just make inspections for those types of, like, basically bed and breakfast without the breakfast, so.
Okay. Councilor Nate.
The issue with that is if, as this passes, we have an influx of those, or even if we don't, and there's still, more than staff can look at in the course of 384 years, that dwelling unit is going to be an unsafe place for them for possibly up to 5 years. And you're already getting feedback from the people who stay there. We can see that feedback as well, to where if somebody has some concerns, or as we talked about in the work session, we could post something to let the short-term renter have an avenue to make complaint on as well. So I'm not as worried about it, especially if you're living in your house. Then it's just a safety problem in general. It's like, well, there's fire code violations here, but you can still live here, just nobody else can stay with you.
Councilor Cook.
Just, I guess that's a question, because the accessory short terms would be the ones we would be waiving the inspection on. And the accessory short term, someone is living there, this is renting the guest room. So this comes back to kind of your question along, are you going to put up a fire exit sign? Are you making sure that you can get out of the windows? But you have a licensing process in there, and the house would be on your honor then, that you're reporting that things are up to code, or there would be an initial inspection and we would waive? No initial.
I'll try to answer that. There was a lot of questions in there. So if number 6 passes, then accessory short term, where it's your house and you live there, you would not be required to have an inspection. It would be self-certified every time.
So, like, for
if this motion fails, it would be required to have one every 5 years.
I would like to amend my motion.
Is that helpful? So
why don't we defeat your motion?
Yeah. Well, can I ask just a really quick clarifying? Can you just really quickly go over between the difference between inspection and a self-certifying? I'm guessing inspection is city person out there looking at it, self-certifying as a checklist?
Yes.
And you're saying, yes, I told the truth? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So number 6 would require that just to be for the more commercial, larger short-term rentals, and not to send city out to inspect for accessory short-term.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion fails. Okay. I'm going to move number 3. I move to direct staff to engross ordinance bill number 517 to increase the maximum number of guest rooms allowed for an accessory short-term rental from 2 to 3.
Second.
Boy?
Yes.
Great American. Two, three. Well, kind of what's the difference? I think if you've got a house large enough. Oh.
Are you adding an extra?
No, I mean, just frankly, if you've got a house large enough to have 3, and I heard Darlene, when she testified, say I've got a 4-bedroom, 4-bath apartment, she can handle 3. Why hold her to 2? I mean, I don't see the value in doing that if you have the ability to have 3. We're setting it at 2 sets up a marketplace. We're creating, I think, a more limited marketplace. You take it to 3 and you can have a larger marketplace. We're assuming there's going to be some activity here, so I just soon try it with 3. Yes.
I would guess for the most part, it's going to be one unit, one family unit or one group. You're not going to be renting it out to 3 individual groups of 1 or 2 people that are coming in. So I think that's good, because you could come with, 2 adult couples, and one of them has kids. 2 kids, so that just makes sense to me. And we're keeping the two persons per bedroom, and then well, it doesn't make any difference if a 10 limit, if we've got 2 people per bedroom, there's only going to be 6 there. Okay.
Counselor Ninky.
Question on how Airbnb actually works. Do they mark it on a per bedroom? So it's like if I have 3 bedrooms, do I have 3
Separate
things out there that so you could have 3 people from anywhere at any time, right?
Yes, you could do that.
You could market it that way, or you could market it as, I have a place that will accommodate this amount of people.
Okay. So it's owner's choice on how they choose to put that into their system. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Counselor McCoy.
Oh, yeah, I'll go back to the stats. I'm not sure this is needed since the average group size is 1.8, and 98% of the trips are less than 4 people. I'm not sure why we're doing this, but I guess it doesn't matter then anyway. It won't be filled. So.
Okay. Counselor Lewis? The eclipse. It's
To Counselor McCoy's point, it accommodates families as opposed to just a couple or 2 couples.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Anyone want to take a run at the definitions or changing the names of these things? I tell you, I use these all the time in travel, and I always think of them as self-caterings. That's the term I've always run into, is a self-catering. And that's a house with a kitchen, and I don't have anyone there watching me either cook or sleep. And it's a separate dwelling unit. I've never heard them called is it short-term rentals or accessory dwelling unit?
The industry term is generally short-term rentals when you look across the jurisdictions, and then the reason we're calling them accessory is because, you know, it's like an accessory dwelling unit. Your main use of the property is still a house, and this is an accessory use to this, you know, short-term. It's an accessory rental to the house. So it's an accessory short-term rental to the house. Ashland calls them short-term travelers accommodations. Bend calls theirs infrequent short-term rentals. There's just various terminology that local jurisdictions have adopted, and
I think we're going to have confusion for some time over what am I when I call, so you guys can sort it out for them. I just don't know why we don't go with some standardized term, but yes.
Following up on your point, Mayor, it just seems to me that the old B&Bs should still be called B&Bs, even if you don't have to provide the second B, because some of them are going to provide the breakfast as a marketing tool. So, and at least then, if you call something B&Bs, you know what that is. And the accessory short term, I could live with that term if the other stuff are just called B&Bs.
You could definitely still call them B&B, and you could call it limited B&B, or something. People are going to call and describe it how they want to describe it when they're asking if they can do it, and we'll tell them where they fall in the zoning code, and that's what we do now.
Does anyone have any further amendments to this?
I would really recommend number 2, limiting the maximum number of people to 10.
So move.
Second. That's the last one.
Yeah, that's why I'm moving. It's the last one.
Can we repeat?
We'll have voted on everything. Yeah, this just says that we will allow no more than 10 people at any one time in Chris's neighborhood.
If you got a 6-bedroom, you can only have 10 people.
Sure.
When the host isn't there, that's important.
Yeah, and no host. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, does anyone have anything else they'd like to do with this motion? We handled the guest house issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else? Yes, Councilor Lewis.
Just want to make sure if it's as it is now, then that number stays at 9.5.
Yes.
What number?
Okay, we have the original
Oh, 95
motion
days.
amended now.
Several times.
Multiple times. Everyone's got a good understanding of what we're voting on. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Things I don't like about it.
Where is that? Okay, your two special orders of business. I have a motion. I move that the council adopt resolution number 2017-29 and create the City Council Transit Committee.
Second.
I've provided you an add-on thing, a discussion. I think we all know there's a substantial concern in the community over the state of our public transportation system, that it doesn't adequately serve the community. We've identified it as a major goal. It's become part of our, at this point, of our strategic plan. There is legislation pending. There's a whole variety of things going on, and it's one of the things I mentioned in the State of the City I would like to do. I think it's time now. I haven't thought it was time for a while, but I think it's time that we pull together a group of counselors, riders, and other members of the public to advise us on kind of how do we respond to some of this, and to also maybe help us provide the transit system with some maybe new and different thinking. We'd have a fresh look at it. So I would ask you to approve this. And you've got a resolution. I'm not going to read you the resolution, so unless you want me to. Yes, Councilor Casey.
Thank you. I'm just curious, who would be staff to this? Where does that fall in?
Well, likely it would be a combination depending upon the initial or ongoing emphasis of the committee. If it's the land use, likely involve community development. If it's transit, transportation, Julie Warnicki, Public Works, or our assistant transportation planner. If it's legislation, if it's lobbying, it may involve city manager's office or our contract lobbyist. So it would really be a team effort. Primarily, I would think, and I would leave that to Peter, either Julie or Anthony, our transportation planners.
I've got one more follow-up. I don't know if 1 year is long enough, I guess, for especially community involvement, and maybe a 2-year term might be better. I could see for counselors maybe a 1 year, but I don't know, just something to think about.
Okay. They can be reappointed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
That's
think
another
it's
question for how long?
Yeah,
forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. No, right, and I will assure you, I have not, have really not given a huge amount of thought of individuals. I have certain categories in my mind, but I have one person I want to appoint for sure, and that's Councilor Hoy at this point. And that's all I've done with it. Just, you know, he has brought it up several times, and I mentioned it to him today. So if any of you are interested in this, let me know. I am also interested in getting someone from Amalgamated Transit Union involved. I have yet to hear from bus drivers, and I've got this feeling they're like a lot of public employees. They know way more than policymakers know about what can be done to improve services like this. So, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Thank you. Information reports.
You were informing.
Councilor, any questions? I'm sorry.
I don't have a question. I just want to say with respect to 6A, Human Rights and Relations Advisory Commission, I thought those were all great applicants, and they had great forms that they filled out, and I think it's going to bring a welcome and continued diversity to that group, and I think those are great appointments.
Yeah, thank you. Those, I will credit those to the commission and Gretchen Bennett. They do a wonderful job of vetting their membership, and it's really, really helpful. Yes.
Just a comment on item 6L for the Rainier Ridge development. I know this is Councilor McCoyd's ward. It kind of abuts mine. We've been having concerns around the intersection with Crossler Middle School, Davis, Holder, and I know the county, the MPO has been helpful. Public Works has been looking at that as well. I just have a concern with higher density going into that area and the infrastructure that's in place. This is a great time to look at what we can do better and how we can make sure that, especially when we're right by a school, a junior high, that kids should be able to walk to and from in those neighborhoods if we're creating a path for that.
Okay. Thank you. That's one that maybe look at for its traffic safety issues in terms of crosswalks and things. Is that?
Are you talking to me?
I apologize.
Yeah. So Davis is a difficult street because development has been coming through, so sidewalks are being installed as frontage improvements are made. Same thing with the future signal at Davis and Liberty. There will be a signal there eventually. We are gathering money from each of the developments. We did do safety improvements several years ago. There is a crossing at Liberty just at the northern edge of the school, so that was installed several years ago. But I do know that it's very difficult along Davis, just because, you know, barring a future, putting in a future bond issue, the sidewalks are just coming as development comes in along Davis, you know, from Liberty to Skyline. So, but we're aware of the difficulties.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Councilor McCoy.
Adding that, one of the things that I've been concerned about, and I know it's a state controlled like highway or whatever, the speed limit there is ridiculous. It's 35, and when you hit the school zone right at that crosswalk, it goes to 45 up around the curve where the kids would be crossing, and continues at 45. And that was fine when nothing was out there, I suppose, but that's not the case anymore. And so I'm not sure how we can work together, but I'm sure with Councilor Cook, I'd like to figure out how to work together and get that down to 45. I think it should be 45 to the city limit, or 35 from 45.
Well, that's just petitioning the state traffic board, the speed limit board to take another look at it, and I can just have Kevin do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you need do you ever need resolutions from the council saying we'd like to have you lower the speed limit on these areas?
No, it's all by data. In fact, it's probably better if the council does not send a resolution.
So I know that the area south of Crossler where Holder comes in, that's the island crosswalk that was put in, but north of Davis as well, because of the influx of properties, not just the 50 Oaks, but the rest of, I believe it's Bella Cresta, which is in my ward, so I think Mildred is going to eventually punch through on Liberty. In McCoyd's ward, there's the Bryant Johnson Memorial Park. So there are these great points within the community, and Secor Park, which is undeveloped, but still in the plan. We've got all these houses going in, all of this community that's being developed, but I just want the record to note that we need to have that park move from on paper to the field, and we need to have a way for the people that live on the other side of Liberty, on the west side, to be able to get to Bryant Johnson Park on the other side where Mildred is. And McCoyd's right. I mean, you're going right out of the city limits, so you hear people gearing up. There's some great hills for speeding, and there have been, back when I was in high school, there were fatal accidents in that region as well. I admit nothing with that. I had an older sister with a lead foot, so.
Well, good. Peter's noted it, so I think we're okay. Okay, let's go to first readings.
Right.
Ordinance Bill number 1517, an ordinance relating to a change to the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan map designation and neighborhood plan map designation for 2440 McGilchrist Street Southeast.
Yeah. I move the staff recommendation. That's all right.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next one, please.
Right. Ordinance Bill number 1017, an ordinance relating to the allowance and regulation of accessory dwelling units, creating new provisions and amending SRC 111.005, 111.020, 400.030, 510.005, 511.005, 512.010, 513.005, 514.005, 515.005, 521.005, 522.005, 523.005, 524.005, 532.015, 532.020, 551.005, 553.005, 554.005, 700.005, 700.035, 700.050, 700.055, 806.005, 806.015, 806.025, 806.055, and 806.075.
Woohoo!
Yeah, excellent. Councilor McCoy.
A lot of fives.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion?
All that this sends us to a public hearing.
Yeah,
So-
that was my discussion, just so we're sending it to a public hearing, we're not actually adopting anything at this
That's
point.
correct.
Yeah.
And a consideration for council, if you would prefer having a work session of council before the public hearing, this is the accessory dwelling unit, so this is the second.
Yes, please. That's a great
Yes.
idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you need a motion?
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right. Ordinance Bill number 1417, an ordinance relating to the authorization of bonds to refund outstanding borrowings.
Yay. Screamer, good deal.
Yeah.
I move staff recommendation.
Second. Because it's so awesome.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Your
Ordinance
staff
bill.
saving you money.
Ordinance Bill number 1617, an ordinance relating to a change to the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan map designation and neighborhood plan map designation for a .57 acre portion of a 1.66 acre site at 1011 Lancaster Drive Northeast.
Councilor Hoy.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by McCoy. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Second readings.
Ordinance Bill 1317, an ordinance relating to a change to the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan map designation for 3290 Boone Road Southeast. Councilor Nanki?
Aye.
Councilor McCoy?
Aye.
Councilor Ossick?
Aye.
Councilor Hoy?
Aye.
Councilor Cook?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser?
Aye.
Councilor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett.
Aye.
Let's see, ordinance bill number 1417, an ordinance relating to the authorization of bonds to refund outstanding borrowings. Councilor McCoy.
Aye.
You need to make a motion on this one.
Move staff recommendation.
For suspending council rules.
Right, to read it double so we can make it happen.
Okay, I move we suspend Council Rule 8G and conduct first and second reading of ordinance bill number 1417 at tonight's meeting, and conduct second reading of the ordinance bill which authorizes the city manager or the city manager's designee to negotiate the financial terms to issue approximately $67 million in bonds to refinance City of Salem full faith and credit obligations for the utility fund and cover costs related to the debt issuance.
Second.
Second by name.
It would be nice to make that one go away.
Okay, now,
I think we're fine now.
okay, so back to Councilor McCoy,
Aye.
Councilor Ossick,
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Cook,
Aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser, Councilor Anderson,
Aye.
Councilor Nanki,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye.
Ordinance Bill number 1217, an ordinance vacating a portion of Rose Garden Way Northeast. Counselor Ossick?
Aye.
No.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You can move that time, I don't care.
Oh my gosh, he said aye.
Counselor Hoy?
I thought he had to make the motion.
Aye.
Counselor Cook?
Aye.
Counselor Lewis?
Aye.
Counselor Kaser? Aye. Counselor Anderson?
I joined with Counselor Ossick, aye.
Counselor Lanky?
Aye.
Counselor McCoy?
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett?
Aye.
Caramba.
And is anyone here for public comment? Okay, and we are adjourned. We'll be having a executive session.